Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 11, 2021 meeting of the Prince George's County Board of Education. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone to turn off any wireless communication devices and mute your microphones to avoid any technical interference with the meeting. Also, we will be using Zoom's Spanish interpretation services this evening. Board member Shepherd will not be translating this evening. It will be Ms. Martinez. So Ms. Martinez, would you please make an announcement that Spanish interpretation is available for the meeting by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of the screen.
Buenas tardes, familia. Si ustedes desean escuchar esta reunión en interpretación, va a estar disponible. Abajo de su pantalla va a haber un icono como un globo de mundo y usted puede estar haciéndole clic para que así se pueda estar conectando y escogiendo el idioma de español para escuchar la reunión en español.
For those who are not able to observe now, this meeting is being recorded and information will be on our board webpage. Ms. Berkeley, would you please call the roll?
Good evening, board members. Mrs. Adam Shepherd, Stafford, sorry.
Here.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Here.
Mrs. Boozer Strother,
Here.
Mr. Burrows,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
Here.
Ms. Jackson,
Present.
Mr. Montero,
Here.
Mr. Murray,
Here.
Mrs. Queen,
Present.
Mrs. Shepherd,
Here.
Mr. Thomas,
Here.
Valentine,
Here.
Mrs. Williams,
Present.
Dr. Miller.
Here.
Thank
Board
you.
member Edward Burrows, would you please lead us in the board prayer and pledge of allegiance this evening?
O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all education policies. May never mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, visible with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now we will have the adoption of the minutes for of the agenda for March 11, 2021 board meeting. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
It is moved in second. Is there a discussion relative to the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it and the agenda is adopted. Next, the approval of board meeting minutes for February 25th, 2001 emergency board meeting and February 25th, 2021 special board meeting and March 1, 2021 special board meeting. May I have a motion to approve the various minutes?
So moved. Second.
It has been, any discussion? No discussion? It has been moved in second that we vote for the approval of the minutes for February 25th, 2021 emergency board meeting, February 25th, 2021 special board meeting, and March 1st, 2021 special board meeting. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it and the agenda is adopted. The minutes are approved. Okay, a report of the chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by announcing some of the board's upcoming virtual meetings. The Academic Achievement Committee meeting will not be held on Monday, March 15th, and will be rescheduled. Policy and Governance Committee meeting will be Monday, March 22nd, 2021. The board meeting will be Thursday, March 25th, 2021. The Zoom login details will be posted on the Board of Education's webpage. At this point, I'm asking, or not asking, I would like to take a point of personal privilege during my report, given that today marks my second month serving in and experiencing the position of the appointed chair, as the appointed chair of the Board of Education. I'd like to report that we have a flourishing school system administration with top of the line leadership and personnel. I was so looking forward to serving on this board with my colleagues. However, as many have seen in the news and on social media, my time on the board has been unfortunately marked by controversy. However, this has not been controversy just for the sake of having controversy, nor has my position been without merit. I now understand why Dr. Thornton left in the middle of his term. I cannot in good conscience stand by and not address questionable activity. I have been representing the sentiments of 2 elected, 4 appointed, one elected student, all who have decided and are determined to uphold the integrity, ethics, and image of this board, the school system, and our county. However, as any good teacher will do, I think it's time I talk about the interim assessment, the grade that certain members of this board should receive. I talked about the grade of D. But rather than talking about grades right now, I'm going to move into some really serious reports, the seriousness of this report. Today, I'm stepping outside of the barriers of our comfort zones to focus on 3 egregious offenses of recent board actions. First is contract steering, creating and awarding a lobbyist contract to save a friend, quote, to save a friend who was about to lose their home, end the quote, only to find out later that the contractor did not exist, nor had it gone through the regular procurement protocol. In addition to the lobbyist contract, 2 board members presented contracts for services not sanctioned or needed by the board at this time. It appears these were acquaintances of these 2 board members. It is to be noted that both contractors were from out of town, I believe California and Arizona, and for services that could be readily procured from our local vendors if needed. The second that the public needs to be aware of is the waste of taxpayer dollars, creating unneeded positions through a, quote, plan to reorganize the board office, by which a cost analysis revealed $200,000 over the board's budget. And there's the appearance in this process of cronyism with the hiring of 2 of the new staff personnel. One brings baggage of having been accused of lying on a recertification application, plus with little to none education work experience compared to some of the other highly qualified applicants. The other new hire was the governor's nominee for a state board of education position, from which he withdrew after being vetted by the state Senate. All of this is public information, and all you have to do is just Google. I'm not calling names tonight, but they are available. The third is abuse of prestige of office. When you follow the money, it makes one wonder if this is not a sign that Prince George's County Board of Education specifically is returning to the, quote, pay for play politics of old. Just pull the campaign finance reports for all the board members who were elected in November 2020. All received significant And I emphasize significant when you do a comparison. And that is why.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Is it?
Cut them off.
Excuse me. I was
All
just
received significant donations from a certain contractor.
Excuse me.
What's even more
Excuse me.
interesting is, please
I'm being
mute.
muted.
Please mute.
I'm being
Please
muted
mute.
continuously.
Yes.
I'm just asking.
I asked for a point of personal.
Is this
personal
appropriate to be
privilege.
discussing?
Yes, it's appropriate. It is appropriate. This is a public meeting, and we have to practice transparency, which has not been, I have not observed with certain board members. So if you object, you have a right, but you, right now, you all will run to the media. I'm telling the public what their what's going on with their tax dollars. And
I just have a question to
I am
the
not going
council.
to argue with you, and I'm not going to debate. I asked for the professional courtesy of allowing me to finish my presentation.
Professional courtesy is not muted.
If I could make a comment, since the issue is now raised for council to provide comment, if Dr. Miller would simply make clear that the statements and opinions that she is stating are those of her own, and that she is not speaking on behalf of the board in toto.
And that is why I said
courtesy is not
personal privilege. I stated that initially. I did not say I was representing. I gave the board information. And then I stated I would be moving into personal privilege.
Privilegio personal.
Now, I will finish with point number 3, the abuse, what I have observed, the abuse of prestige of office. When you follow the money, it makes one wonder if this is not a sign that Prince George's County is returning to the pay-for-play politics of old. Just pull the campaign finance reports for all the board members who were elected in November 2020. All received significant donations from a certain contractor. What's even more interesting is that the donations started to flow in after the agreement was signed with the Prince George's County Public School System. Even more interesting is that for each of these elected board members, that contractor gave the highest donations or were one of the highest donors. So now it appears that they have paid for these elected officials. It should be noted that at the last meeting, there was a board action that was voted on to expand the agreement to add more work for this contractor, at which time certain board members who received those campaign donations should have recused themselves. So to the media and public who criticized why a board meeting was canceled and why the chair has requested an investigation and performance audit, I urge and challenge you now to demand answers to these allegations and start with the former vice president. I conclude my comments, and we will move on to the CEO's comments.
Good evening.
Buenas noches.
I'd be remiss if I didn't begin tonight's remarks with an acknowledgement that almost exactly 1 year ago today, the state closed all schools in the state due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I am pleased to report that the signs of a new normalcy are returning to Prince George's County Public Schools. Our central office employees resume working at their assigned locations, and more of our school-based staff return to work and will begin teaching from their school buildings soon. On the athletics front, outdoor workouts and conditioning began. This has been a slow walk to where we are, but I am encouraged by every step forward and grateful to the Prince George's County Public School community for taking this journey with me and trusting me in my decision-making. As we prepare to welcome 42,000 students back into our schools, I want to remind families that the state immunization requirements have not changed. So please make sure that your child has all mandatory vaccinations before their return in April. More information is available on the Prince George's County Public School website. Parents should also take the time to update their contact information in School Max so they don't miss any important messages from their child's school. Several members of our Prince George's County Public School community have recently been in the spotlight for their achievements. Our weekly Senior Spotlight feature kicked off with Kelly Mooling from Gwynn Park High School and Emerson T. Wang from Charles Herbert Flowers High School. ABC 7 also featured the two students in its Spotlight in Education. In Tulip Grove Elementary School, a third grader, Julia Balsam, was spotlighted by the nonprofit organization called Honored after being nominated by student David Kutrea for her creativity and virtual teaching. Samuel Ogle Middle School sixth grader Donovan Wright, under the direction of art teacher Nicole Simpson, won the Maryland Art Education Association Youth Art Month Maryland Flag Design Contest for the middle school division. And Northwestern High School alum Jermaine Fowler is in the news after starring in the new Coming to America movie, which also features Charles Herbert Flowers High School alum and dancer Alania Wilt and Eleanor Roosevelt High School alum and harpist Erin Clark. And lastly, Junior Achievement of Greater Washington announced that 5 students from Potomac High School's 3DE program won first place in the Arby's National Case Competition. The 3D students learn academic concepts by collaborating on case challenges that are designed to solve real-world problems presented by real businesses. Arby's Case Challenge asks students to develop innovative solutions to better meet the needs and interests of its teenage consumers. The Potomac High School team focused on cultural agility to inform the customer experience and wowed Arby's executives with their pitch and presentation that utilized original survey data to drive their decision-making. The team competed against top students from DeKalb County, Georgia, Baltimore, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. Needless to say, we are Prince George's County Public School proud, and we know that you are too. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goldson. Are there any comments? If none, we'll move to the public comment on the agenda and non-agenda items. For those members of the public who signed up to provide written or electronic public comments, comments will be posted on board docs for review by board members and public. Colleagues, we have 15 registered live public comment speakers this evening. And a note to the speakers, you have been registered to speak in a public forum where the Board of Education will listen to your comments. The board will not address your comments. You must speak on the topic for which you have been registered. All registered speakers will have 3 minutes to provide comments. At the sound of the buzzer, speakers may complete that sentence only. And if you don't hear the buzzer, I will intervene. Registered speakers may not relinquish any part of their speaking time to another registered or unregistered individual. Speakers may not address individuals or issues with profanity or derogatory terms. You will be warned once. If you continue, your comments will be terminated. Speakers are encouraged to use titles rather than names. For example, principal, CEO, deputy superintendent, etc. Please leave a copy of your statement in the file box located next to the microphone. Well, you're supposed to send them in to us via email or board docs. Your adherence to these guidelines will enable the public participation process to move smoothly. Our first registered speaker for tonight is Ms. Tanya Vita Wingfield with the general statement. Ms. Wingfield. Is Ms. Wingfield here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, board members. A basic commitment pledge by each board member is to recognize the board does not run the schools, but see that the schools run well. By being a part of a policy making and not control board, by being part of a policymaking and control board rather than an administrative board. This is outlined in Board Policy 108. For example, Policy 5140, which has a direct link to student achievement and accountability, still references No Child Left Behind of 2001, which was replaced in 2015 with the Every Student Succeed. This is a perfect tool for the board to use to track student achievement and budget dollars earmarked for that goal. We also have Board Policy 3415, which still references the school-based management team, which was used over 15 years ago to encourage parent involvement and community involvement. And then we even have Policy 5163, which talks about students with asthma, and that policy is still based on data from 2001 and what has not been updated since 2010. Instead, what I'm seeing is a disturbing pattern that has me asking, why are several elected board members trying to shift pools of taxpayer dollars under their control? Case in point, on December 16, 2020, there was an emergency meeting of the Board of Education Office Reorganization Committee, which was formed in violation to Board Policy 8100. This 5-member committee met in a closed session to discuss personnel matters that didn't meet the requirements of the Open Meeting Act to bar the public. During the meeting, the committee members voted that they should exist 24 hours after the meeting was posted by the committee for public to know about, and the actions never were presented before the full board for a vote. Then less than 2 hours from the start of the meeting, this committee actually, and it wasn't an officer, one of the committee members sent an email to an HR representative directing the individual to post positions decided in this illegal committee meeting and saying that these positions were open for hiring. Based on the organizational chart that I received from my representative, this reorganization will divert millions that should go for school-based resources. I have filed an appeal with the State Board of Education on the fact that the actions of this committee were arbitrary, unreasonable, and illegal. And I will post this appeal on my webpage, nehemiahvision.org. The school board has every right to provide oversight and give advice to the administration, but you cannot break the law and violate board policies to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wingfield. Next, Teresa Dudley, Prince George's PGCEA reopening MOU. Ms. Dudley?
Yes, good. Oh, I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. I would be remiss if I said I wasn't a little taken aback by what I just saw. The reopening plan, as we are supposed to be reopening next week, has raised many concerns amongst our members. Concerns about us still being in the red zone according to CDC requirements. We don't necessarily have all of the tools in place that we need to have in place. And I understand that Dr. Golson is doing the best that she can in trying to accommodate all of these things, all of these requirements. However, the air filtration systems in many of our schools are questionable. The having children 6 feet away from each other in some of our schools is questionable. We also have the issue of PPEs for staff. And what are we going to do when the children have, our contract says the students are supposed to have a duty-free, the adults have a duty-free lunch, and they leave out of the classroom and then they come back. The kids have had their mask off and the air is now contaminated. How are the teachers supposed to have their planning periods when when they're in the classroom with students? That's not planning time. You're not going to be away from your students. We have educators who are specialists on carts who go in and out of classrooms. It don't have specific places. We also have many people that share small spaces that do not allow for social distancing. It is unconscionable in our opinion. And as much as Dr. Golson and the county executive have made attempts to get the vaccines, all of our members have not received their second doses of their vaccine and will not have their second dose of the vaccine by the 17th of December. So it is unconscionable, in our opinion, to ask people to go back when they are not fully vaccinated. We are also asking for accommodations for people who have loved ones who are sick at home, who have chronic diseases that cannot afford to be exposed to the virus. The children will not be vaccinated when we return. And we were asking that those educators be allowed some accommodations to be able to still work distance learning, and that those that have applied for accommodations be allowed to work distance learning from home until they get a decision one way or another. I think that the fact that you continue to have your meetings virtually are indicative of the fact that you also have your concerns about the spread of the virus. And so we would ask that you extend some courtesy to our members. It is dangerous. We just had another staff member die the other day. My members have great anxiety. And if I look a little tired today, it's because I have been listening to people cry on the phone for the past several weeks about their individual situations. And you know me, I try to be Fly Betty when I come in here.
Ms. Dudley, your time is up. Thank you.
Please take these things under advisement, and we ask for a memorandum of understanding on safety issues, and please don't open the schools until it's safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dudley. Next, Dr. Donna Christie on the reopening.
Thank you. Good evening, esteemed board members. I am Dr. Donna Christie, school psychologist and PGCEA president-elect. I come to you this evening with serious concerns about the plan to bring students back into schools and start the hybrid model. Despite a year of planning for the implementation of this plan, it seems like some basic questions are still unanswered. For example, where are related service providers, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and psychologists expected to work? Even under normal circumstances, they struggle to find adequate workspace. We often have to clean out closets and find a small table to work with our students. This is so common, we have a name for it. We call it a cloffice. Not only do we work in cloffices, but we often have to share the cloffice with another related service provider. And of course, since that space was originally meant to be a closet, it has no ventilation or windows. So we ask, where are these employees supposed to be reporting to next week? My suggestion is that they be permitted to continue working from home. We already know that they will be continuing to function virtually. If they are still working virtually, why do they need to be in a building at all? Their absence from the building would make everyone else more safe. The fewer people in the building, the less chance of someone bringing the virus to work with them. Then we have the issue of lunch. Some schools are serving lunch in the cafeteria, others in classrooms. When asked who is going to monitor the kids while the teachers have their duty-free lunch, the response was specialists like music, art, and PE teachers. The absolute disrespect for these professional educators inherent in that response is appalling. Specialists work with entire schools, sometimes more than one school. They have to plan lessons for multiple grade levels and then grade the work for every student in the building. How is it that they would have the ability to cover lunch? Their work and contribution to educating the whole child is every bit as important as the classroom teacher. Other districts have hired temporary employees for this. Why have we not done that? My list of concerns goes on and on. Concerns for educators with at-risk family members, educators scrambling to find last-minute childcare for their own kids, schools without modern ventilation systems. I saw a recent capital improvements report that includes the replacement and repair of HVAC systems in some of our schools. We just don't have the answers that we need to believe that this plan will provide safe and healthy learning environments. I recommend that we start with the equity learning hubs so that we can better meet the needs of our students that are struggling with virtual learning. Then restart with in-person learning next school year after more of the population has had a chance to be vaccinated and the virus is under control. And also, I want to remind everybody to access their employee assistance program services if they need support with their own mental health.
Thank you, Dr. Christie. Next, Michelle M. Clark on the budget.
Good evening, everyone. And speaking as Michelle Clark here, I'm a member of the Board of Directors of PGCEA, but I'm speaking based on my personal experience. As Dr. Christie stated, there are many people who have to share very small spaces in order to provide services in our buildings. I work at Kenmore Early Childhood Center. At Kenmore, I believe they are turning our media center into a gathering place for all of our speech pathologists, our physical therapists when they're in the building, the occupational therapist when she's in the building, and the itinerant teachers that are assigned to our building. There's not enough space in that room for everybody to be socially distanced and safe. And that's going to be another issue as we're talking about the meals in the classrooms. Generally speaking, at least at the Early Childhood Center, at least one of our staff people goes with the children to lunch. Lunch will be in the classroom, but that means that somebody has to be in there while all the children have all their masks off. And that's going to be breakfast, lunch, and I'm not sure, we usually get a snack. I'm hoping we'll get a snack again if and when we come back. So that's multiple times per day. I, like Teresa Dudley, have received numerous phone calls from fellow educators, including one from Frances Fuchs, who called me in absolute tears just last week to tell me that one of her 3-year-old babies was at Children's Hospital. His parents had both had COVID, and his mother was 8 months pregnant and in danger of losing the baby. This is happening without being exposed in schools. The community spread rates are still high, and they're above the matrix that you're using to go by. And there was actually an uptake last week for a day, but that slowed our progression to getting into the safe area. Dr. Goldson, you've been great in making sure we've stayed safe so far. All we're asking is that you stay to your true to your word and make sure that we are out of the red before we have children coming into the buildings in person. It's not just for the safety of the employees, it's for the safety of everyone, the children, the employees, and all of our families. Because while I was able to be vaccinated, my husband has not been vaccinated. And even though you're vaccinated, it doesn't mean you can't contract the virus. It just won't put you in the hospital or kill you. So I can still bring it home to my loved ones. And I don't think I'll be around my 75-year-old mother much at all after we come back to work. So,
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ms. Clark.
So please take those things into account. Thank you.
All right. Next, Mr. Paul Semmelfort, Public Health and Safety Issue, School Nurse Vacancy. Mr. Semmelfort. Did he sign in, Ms. King?
Yes, he should be joining shortly.
In the interest of time, I can move on to Ms. Ellen O'Neill, the Reading Work Group.
It's my understanding that Ms. O'Neill may have had to sign into under another name. So I am running a check for that name at the moment.
Well, we can come back to her.
Oh,
Can we move
my
on to?
apologies, Dr. Miller. She just should have moved over. It's under Luca Fazio, but it's my understanding that that is Ellen O'Neill.
That's correct. I apologize. I wasn't able to change it in time, but this is Ellen O'Neill. Should I start my comments?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in support of the Science of Reading Work Group. The NAACP considers reading proficiency to be a civil rights issue because the information age requires literacy to participate fully in a society that pushes non-readers systematically to its margins. Given this, why would our county continue to use curricula that even the authors now acknowledge must be revised to address profound deficits in core literacy instruction? And why would PGCPS continue to ignore mountains of evidence showing that the foundational reading skills are not being taught explicitly and systematically? Grade level reading for all PGCPS students is an achievable goal, but has been overlooked for a generation, impacting our most vulnerable students. Our most recent PARCS scores indicate that 70% of all elementary school students read below grade level, and 93% of special ed students read below grade level. And yet, in an MSDE financial filing on specialized interventions, we find that PGCPS spent $93,000 to deliver leveled literacy to 30 kindergarten students. It spent $23,000 to deliver reading recovery to 23 elementary students. These programs have been proven to not only fail to teach reading, they actually undermine the reading process by teaching children to guess at words and meaning. We can solve this. We are doing that in Frederick County Public Schools, in Marysville, Ohio, in the state of Mississippi. Why can't we do it here? Our great teachers in PGCPS want this. They clamor for effective teacher training and instruction. According to Kareem Weaver of the NAACP, our teachers have been asked to figuratively make bricks without straw. They've had no opportunity to close the achievement gap using preparation, curricula, materials that were misaligned with the science of reading, but they were often blamed for the results. Let me talk to you about a student who is in 6th grade at one of our middle schools. Her Spanish-speaking mother has been trying to get help for her since she was in kindergarten. For 6 years, teachers did not know why Maria could not read or do math. They simply promoted her to the next grade. Last spring, her mother finally had Maria tested at Children's Hospital, and they found out Maria is 4 grade levels below in reading and in math. Her mother asked to meet with teachers at her middle school in August. After 4 IEP meetings, 2 of which did not include an interpreter, Maria's mom is desperate to understand why her daughter is regressing in all academic areas. An English language learner special ed teacher in PGCPS who knows about this situation admitted, "We have no idea how to help this child." The SPED director at Maria's school admitted she loses sleep over how to help this child. How can the proposed reading work group help Maria and the more than 70% of below grade level readers in PG? Kareem Weaver of the NAACP states it clearly. First, our district must acknowledge its mistakes and commit to following the research and science. Next, we have to tell the parents that actually your children aren't lost causes. We just weren't applying the research. And third, we must ask our leaders to act with humility and courage to enable us to shift towards the science of reading without blaming others, and instead embrace this time of reckoning for all the promise and potential it holds. Thank you again for allowing me to make comments.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Next will be Zena Whitworth on the COVID-19 athletics and returning to school as a coach.
Dr. Miller, if I
Oh,
may.
did Mr. Semmelfort come in?
If I may, Dr. Miller, no, Mr. Semmelfort is not in the attendee pool. Neither is Zena Wentworth or Maritza Solano. So Ms. Yvette Reyes has been moved over and is ready to provide comment.
Okay, Yvette Reyes on the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools, CEO's reopening plan.
Hi, good evening, esteemed Board of Education members. I am a parent of a 2nd grader at Mary Harris Mother Jones Elementary School. I have been doing a lot of work, as a parent leader in the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools. And honestly, reopening the schools at this moment, I feel like there's a lot of uncertainties that are still going on in a lot of parents' minds. I just came from Flowers High School, where there were a lot of parents who had a voice on this opinion, and hopefully they're listening to me now as a parent, as an advocate of my child and children alike in PG County schools. I am a product of this county and I love this county, but I do feel that reopening the schools based on an assumption at this very moment that we will hopefully be in the green by opening in a few weeks, I feel it's it's too rushed, to say the least. In our school alone, we have over 1,000 kids that are going to school. Even if half the parents come and decide to do virtual learning, that's still the max capacity in our schools. In our school, we have a storage space that's being utilized as a music room. We have our multi-purpose room, as someone else has mentioned. It's not only a cafeteria, but it's also our gymnasium. We don't have the space to hold all these kids in our building, let alone require some of our teachers who have yet to be vaccinated in order to teach our kids and still be safe. Honestly, we have to be able to do the testing, the examinations in all our schools, and let that be known to parents like myself, so that they can make a more educated response to see if they're going to send their kids back. Not only does that put our kids at risk, that puts my other parents alike at risk, parents who are still an essential worker like myself, all my coworkers and colleagues. Honestly, there's a lot of things that I can say, but why does it feel like this decision is being rushed and only being 2 months before the school year is over? I say use the rest of this time. Why not use the rest of this time in order to make sure that each of our schools are sanitized, that our teachers have ample enough time in order to get vaccinated, and hopefully have adjustment periods for the teachers that have this. Equity hubs have been one of the things that have passed not too long ago. What's the progress in that? That will limit having more kids inside our school buildings. I just hope that you guys will take this into consideration and hopefully use the time that we have left in this school year in order to make it safe for our kids to go back, not just for our children, but parents, families, and even the staff that has been dedicating their time in order to try and help these kids as best as they possibly can, especially in the circumstances that they're in. They're taught to be innovative thinkers and think quickly on their feet by doing virtual learning.
Ms.
We
Martin,
need more
Ms. Reyes, your
innovative
time
thinkers.
is up. Thank you.
Thank
Did
you
get it,
for
the
this
last
platform.
sentence? Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
ma'am.
Okay. I understand that Mr. Semaphore is back, is here.
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mr.
Okay.
Semaphore, public health and safety issue, school nurse vacancy.
So I'm a teacher at Annapolis Road Academy High School and also the head faculty rep. And the teachers, we thank Dr. Golston and your leadership thus far for getting us to where we are and keeping us safe first and foremost. So we're asking for that extension and the fact that our school nurse that serves is not only Annapolis Road, but also Tall Oaks on the same campus on Chance Road, died last spring when schools closed during the pandemic. And that nurse has not been replaced yet. And that's an issue. And I talked to the school administration, and they're not sure whether or not they're going to give us a nurse. And we have students that are coming back with serious health concerns that requires a nurse's skill and judgment. It is not for staff or administrators to deal with. The second part is, I know in the reopening plan, they talk about a care room, but I asked at a faculty meeting, who's going to run this? It's like some non-classroom based staff and administrators. They should be focused on teaching and learning of children that are there and online. This needs to be done and facilitated by the school nurse. The other big issue is the fact that supposedly the school nurse is supposed to be doing the rapid testing, coordinating, COVID, and we don't have one that serves as 2 buildings. It should not be on us educators. We got too much on our plate and administrators just to deal with this alone. Please, we're asking, as your moral and ethical obligation for a safe and orderly learning environment, that we expeditiously somehow nurse full time for our both our buildings and programs, so that they can keep us safe and the students safe, and attend to the students' healthcare needs, and not allow staff or administrators to have to take care of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Semaphore. Phyllis Wright. Did I understand you to tell me that Miss Maritza Solano, is she here?
She is not here. However, I will check again while Ms. Wright gives her testimony.
Okay, Miss Phyllis Wright, schools reopening?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Wright, PTO president at William Hall Academy and the mother of 2 children. Safety comes first. First of all, I've lost 5 family members to COVID-19, so I know that this is real. I think that we are rushing too fast to open up. I have a problem with that. I know in my school alone, we have tile issues in the ceiling, plumbing issue, and HVAC filter. That's a main concern to me when it comes to our children and our staff. Of course, I want my kids back in school. I want my kids to have a great education, but right now is not the time to send my children and our kids in Prince George's County back in these buildings. They're old, they're not clean. We do not have enough staff to keep these buildings clean or to do the work. We have tickets from 3 years ago. They want us to resubmit the tickets if though they are new tickets. That work has not been done. I have a problem with that. We want to rush to throw our kids in these schools. My problem is because the governor told Dr. Golson, I love you dearly, but you're rushing on this. You're rushing, and a lot of people are going to get sick. I am not sending my kids back in these buildings because you and I know that these buildings are not safe. Now, whatever order that you're getting or whatever pressure that you're under, please make our kids come first, and our teachers and our staff. That's the only way that we can recover in Prince George's County. I have lost 5 family members through this pandemic. I refuse to lose my children and any more teachers that we have already lost throughout this county. That's all I need to say. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. I would also like to call to your attention to the written and pre-recorded testimony submitted by several students from Charles Herbert Flowers High School. First is Niasilike Tabe, educational policies. Is Niasike Tabe.
Oh, Dr. Dr. Miller, the students from Charles Herbert Flowers said that they were going to send in written or pre-recorded testimony. So when that is received, we will post it to board docs so that all board members, so it will be available to all board members and members of the public.
Okay, well, I'd like to acknowledge what their topics were. Ms. Tabe was educational policies. Hannah Dunson, going back to school. Drezel Green, the return to in-person school. Omodara Ojebubo, party or ideology. And Diana Goodman, school athletics and COVID-19. With that, we will move on to discussion. First will be our legislative update. Board Member Ahmed, as committee chair, would you please present the recommendation from the Policy and Governance Committee's March 8th meeting?
Yes, colleagues, the Policy and Governance Committee met virtually on March 8th, 2021, with the following members in attendance: myself as committee chair, committee vice chair Joshua Thomas, Pamela Boozer-Struther, Edward Burrows, and Nina Jackson. We also had Mrs. Belinda Queen join us as a guest. During the meeting, amongst other items, the committee considered the following bills as outlined in the attached report, which you can find on board docs. The first is the Governor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, which is HB 15, also SB 85. And the second is Education Student Organized Peaceful Demonstrations, which is House Bill 753. After discussion, the committee voted to recommend that the Board of Education support both of these bills, and this recommendation is being forwarded for consideration by the Board of Education. As such, I'm moving on behalf of the committee to recommend approval, specifically support of these two bills by the Board of Education. Thank you.
Okay, the recommendation has been moved on behalf of the committee. No second is required because it was moved on behalf of the committee. As presented, the board is being asked to support two bills. Is there a discussion? No discussion? Then I think we're ready
Dr.
to
Miller,
vote.
Dr.
Yes.
Miller, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I have a
Ms.
quick
Williams.
question. Thank you, committee, for the work that you're doing on behalf of the board. I just had a question about the two, well, not really about the two that were presented, but about all of the pieces of legislation that is going through through Annapolis right now. I see that there are two that you're asking for us to support, but I thought typically we have a number of bills presented to us one at a time, and then we take a vote, yay or nay. Did you all do that in committee already, or how are we planning on doing all of the bills that are going through Annapolis that reference not only education, but in reference to the priority that we sent earlier in the year?
Yes, Ms. Williams, I can address that. The way that we handle this in committee is typically we go through one by one. We're briefed on what the bill is about. And if there's a motion by a member of the committee in support or in opposition of said bill, then we move forward as such.
And so what happens to the other bills that are going through Annapolis? Are we giving our opinion, and how are we doing that?
Yes, so there are some bills that we had asked for more information on. For example, the committee had asked for more information on bills regarding immigration. And so we received a report with more information about those immigration bills. We were also at one committee meeting, there was one bill that we didn't know where it was going to go. And so we asked for it to be reported back to us again. What is the status of this bill and what is this looking like? And so there are situations like that that arise. Dr. Goldson's team does a really good job of trying to make sure that we have information about the education specific bills, and definitely the delegation's education specific bills. And so those are often shared with us as well, regardless of whether or not we take a position. If you take a look at the Policy and Governance Committee meeting agenda that's posted in Board Docs, you'll see our latest report that has it divided up into different sections. And one of those sections is, delegation bills. Another one is bills of interest, and so on and so forth. So you can see it delineated in that way with details and also information about hearing dates.
Thank you. And how is the one that really piqued my attention, and I think it's an important topic for us to be involved in. However, I don't recall that immigration was a priority of the board.
Yeah, Ms. Williams, I can speak, and I think that there may be other members of the committee that could also speak to this. But because we work with so many of our students come from immigrant families and come from immigrant backgrounds, we determined that it would be beneficial for the committee to look at bills that affect students that are immigrants or that come from immigrant families, to support as many efforts as possible in establishing their rights. And so we took a position, I believe, at our last meeting on one immigration related bill. And this bill that's before us on immigration here is essentially creating an Office of Immigrant Affairs to assist immigrants in the state. And the bill establishes the appointment, powers, duties, and responsibilities of both the office and its office director, and the director must report to the governor and the General Assembly, detailing the activities of the office. I will say there were a number of immigration bills that we looked at. This was the one that we moved forward for consideration from the board.
Thank you. And like I said, I think that it's very important that we have some attention paid to the immigration bill, because we have such a diverse community in Prince George's County Public Schools. So this is very, very important. However, I think that as a collective board, we set forth, I believe, 5 priorities, I believe, or maybe it was 6 with the addition. And I'm just sort of surprised that that those aren't coming forward. Those priority items aren't being presented forward. So I just wanted to just understand the thought process behind that. And that's all my comments. Thank you.
Sure, Ms. Williams, if you would like, I can address that piece as well. Because we already voted on a position of those items, these are items in which the board has not taken a position on. So that's why it's coming before us in this way. The other items we have taken positions on. And so that's why you're not, but if you're talking about you want a more regular update, then perhaps it would make sense as these items are being brought forward to the board, if we could have board staff also upload the last legislative update that's presented to the board and committee. So you have the additional information about other bills that are being tracked by the committee.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, are we ready to vote?
Oh, Board Chair, I have a question.
Who is that, Mr. Valentine? Board
Yes.
Member Valentine?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. I had a question for my board colleague, Ahmed. Once action is taken on these items, how is the position of the board being communicated to those who are running these bills in Annapolis? Is there someone right now representing the school board on behalf of these issues, or are we writing this on behalf of the school board to the member of the legislature who is championing these bills?
Yeah, that is a very good question, Mr. Valentine. I asked that question as well. What was explained to me by legal counsel is that currently all of the hearings have been heard on several of these bills, and so they're waiting for the votes and for them to move over to the other body before legislation or positions can be written up for these specific items. So we're kind of in that middle zone right now. We're waiting for crossover and all of that.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Valentine?
No, thank you. And I want to recognize board colleague Ahmed for her leadership. I appreciate your communication. I appreciate how responsive you've been to questions of members who had concerns. And so I mean, our last meeting, you were very, very upfront. You were very communicative, and I appreciate everything you've done as chair of this committee. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. It's a team effort, the whole committee. We're the best committee. I'm just putting it out there. Okay, I'm going to be quiet. Sorry, Dr. Miller, you can go ahead now.
Okay, let's move the agenda.
Doing really well.
Thank you. I see a hand up, but I don't know who it is.
Board Member Queen.
Oh, Board Member Queen. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have a question for Board Member Ahmed. Board Member Williams mentioned about other things that have already went through. So is there a type of tracking system for policies that you guys have already brought to us, or things that you want us to follow in Annapolis and we've actually voted on in support of to see where it has went after the fact? I mean, it's one thing for us you guys to do all that hard work, and y'all do great work, as Board Member Valentine just said, but then it comes to us and we do the vote. But who is following it afterwards? Is it some type of tracking system that follows, so it would, let us know as board members what is happening and what has happened on this bill?
Yeah, thank you for that, Ms. Queen. Currently on the legislative reports that we receive, it says what the last action was. So if it was heard, then it says it was heard and what the date was. In terms of more tracking beyond that, I may have to yield to Ms. King to see if she can provide some details about how that organization works, either now or at a later time.
The State Legislative Service has a tracking system. It lists the bill numbers and where the bill is, well, the title of the bill. Then it tells you where it is. It goes to a committee. If it comes out of that committee, then it goes to either the House or to the Senate. And if it comes out of the House, then it goes over to the committee in the Senate that's similar to the one in the House. If it comes out of the Senate committee, it goes to the full Senate, and then the full Senate votes for it. And that's what it gives you the date of the meeting. It gives you the action, whether it passed or failed. So that information is available. And I will be glad to give you the link so that you can just pull it up and it'll pop up for you.
So thank you, Madam Chair, but I actually already know that process. What I'm talking about is, as a board, what the tracking system does the Board of Education have? Do we have a tracking system that when we are voting on different things and changes, that we are keeping a track as a board on what's happening with these bills, not what happens in delegation, how it goes in the delegation? I know that, but I'm just saying, because we're standing and we're making a position as a board on different things. And we've been doing it for the last 2 years since I've been on the board. I noticed that, but I just don't know what has been happening after the fact. For instance, just like you say, what if it failed, or what if it still, it ends like last year and a lot of bills didn't get through? Well, at least we'll know what happened. At least we know something that we voted on to support last year is coming back up again this year because of COVID. A lot of bills didn't get. I'm just wondering, do we as the Board of Education have a tracking process to know what's going on with these bills?
Ms. Queen, I can address that. In the way that you've described, I cannot say that we have it in the way that you've described.
Thank you so very much. That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready for the vote? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Oppose? Abstentions? The motion carries. And there won't be a need to call a roll. Now we'll move to the consent agenda. The Chief Executive Officer's Prince George's County Public Schools reopening plan. Dr. Golson, please introduce item 5.1.
Thank you. Item 5.1, I present to you the September 16th, 2020 Prince George's County Public School reopening plan, which was approved by Maryland State Department of Education on September 22nd, 2020, and received accommodation for being one of the best 3 plans in the state of Maryland. I therefore ask the Board of Education to accept the recommendations of the CEO to approve the reopening plan that we have been following since August 31st, 2020.
Is that it? Thank you. Board Member Murray, as committee chair, would you please present the recommendation from the Operations, Budget, and Fiscal Affairs Committee to amend the reopening plan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Operation, Budget, and Fiscal Affairs Committee held a meeting on March the 4th. The committee discussed the PGCPS reopening plan, and after a robust discussion, the committee voted unanimously of those present to recommend to the Board of Education that it makes the following amendment to the PGCPS reopening plan. The PGCPS achieved the following 3 goals. Number 1 being 100% of schools satisfying basic federal and state health and safety standards before beginning in-person learning and throughout the progression of in-person learning. Number 2 being health and safety checklists that are completed for each school, updated monthly and posted online for public consumption. And number 3 was that before the end of the school year, 100% of PGCPS schools will have conducted in-person walkthroughs with health officials, if available, and board members to review and document health and safety standards at each school. With that being said, I'd like to move to adopt Dr. Golson's reopening plan with the following amendments that I've just read.
Okay, well, no second is required because it was moved on behalf of the committee. So given the committee's report is seeking to amend the CEO's recommendations, there will need to be a 2/3 vote to do so, or a total of 9 votes. Before I open this for discussion, a reminder to board members that we will adhere to our time requirements of 5 minutes for the first round of questions and 3 minutes for the second round. We will now begin the discussions. I don't see any hands.
Sorry, Dr. Miller, since I'm co-host, I can't raise my hand.
Oh, okay.
Did Ms. Ahmed raise her hand before me?
I see a hand up.
It's Board Member Ahmed.
Board Member Ahmed.
Thank you. I wanted to thank the Operations and Budget Committee for bringing this forward. The amendments that I feel are very aligned with the conversation that we had at our previous board meeting around checklists and making sure that there's transparency around the different factors that go into getting a school prepared for reopening. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate the connection to CDC federal and state guidelines as well. I think all of that makes sense to me. And so I wanted to thank the committee for bringing this forward.
Thank you. I see 4 hands are up. I don't know who they are. Ms. Williams?
You're muted, Ms. Williams.
Sorry about that. I have the listing up, and I was after Board Member Ahmed, but after me will be Board Member Adam Stafford, Board Member Queen, and then Board Member Jackson. I just had a question for Dr. Golson regarding the what did the facilities group do in order to prepare for school? Was there a checklist or something that you all followed in order to prepare for opening that we had to meet? And if so, what was that, and who reviewed that to ensure that we were in compliance?
Yes, we have a school readiness checklist. It has 18 items on it. 10 of those items you could find on the MSEA list, or for the American Teachers Federation or the National Educators Association or CDC. What you'll find is that many of the checklists are very much the same. While we have 18 items on it, there are 10 that are congruent amongst all 4 of those. We do have some additional items that are very specific to just PGCPF. So for example, making sure that all the water fountains are off because we plan to provide bottled water. That's not a CDC requirement. It's not from any of the other list requirement. It's one that we are implementing. And so that will be the difference. All principals have been asked to complete that school readiness checklist by Monday, March 15th, and to have that checklist posted on their school website. In addition, we have, as stated in our hybrid learning operational guide, COVID-19 compliance committee that is created that will meet weekly to review any school issues, look and make sure that all of the guidelines that we completed on the checklist are still continuing to be adhered to, and to address any school specific issues weekly to make sure that they are updated, completed, corrected, etc.
Thank you. And so the list that facilities use, was that was something that you all created and then you all reviewed? Is that something that you feel comfortable with posting on the website for all the schools?
Yeah, at the last board meeting, I want to say it was March 1st. I think it was Board Member Queen that asked if we could publish that checklist, and I said definitely, and that is the same checklist that we'll post.
Okay, thank you so much.
I apologize, whatever board member brought it up.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions that I have. The next board member prepared to speak is Board Member Adam Stafford.
Thank you so much. And actually, thank you, colleague Williams, for your question. That's one of the questions that I'm getting a lot from my community members, just wanting to know the process by which schools are prepared for building readiness and wanting just more transparency around what are the status of those different checklists. And so I think that, I think this administration has done a great job of being transparent with all partners and stakeholders. And I think that this amendment is just another step of providing another level of transparency so that at a glance, families that have students at more than one school can go to a centralized place and see, where are we with PPE at this school? Where are we with HVAC renovations? Where are we with water in addition to air filter systems? And I think that those types of just basic questions will help to increase and boost public confidence with going back to school. As we heard today in the public comment, there is a lot of apprehension to going back into the building. And as was pointed out, I mean, even here, us as board members, it's important for us to come back and to show that we have confidence in our school buildings. And so I think that having this information available for the public to see and to make those decisions, as you said, this is a family decision. This is something that should be discussed, within the community. And we want to just, ensure that there is that level of transparency. So I just, again, want to thank the OBAFA committee for taking up these checklists. I was a guest at that meeting, and I think that, thank you for listening. And I think this is just another step in, increasing the transparency and openness that we've started so far. So thank you so much.
I just want to add that, can I just add that an
Sure.
amendment is not necessary, as I committed on March 1st, when Board Member Queen asked that we comply with that request, that will be implemented as stated before and will be posted on March 15th. Thank you. Somebody.
Yes, Dr. Miller, we have Board Member Queen, followed by Board Member Jackson, and then Board Member Valentine.
Thank you so very much. First of all, I definitely want to recognize and definitely give what is due to Dr. Golson and her staff for a great job of the reopening plan, and let you know that you are appreciated for your service and all you have done. So don't think we as a board, and I'm sure your staff and even the community members appreciate all you have done, even over this last year, and keeping everybody safe. I do know that socially, emotionally, and mentally, a lot of people are still in fear. COVID has put a lot of fear, and it's a lot of adjustment on a lot of families. In all honesty, you guys, as a person who have heard so many people, as you just witnessed, Ms. White stated that she had 5 family members died. I went to the teachers union as I went today, as they did the protest, and I actually talked to a teacher who didn't even know who I was at first as a board member, who was crying because one of her colleagues just died from one of our schools. Our staff is hurting. They're not only hurting because of the loss of someone during a pandemic, they're also in fear of coming back because of the uncertainty that many of us have. So I do understand it. I do understand the need for us actually to open up for the ones who really need that support. I understand that. In the same token, I understand the fact that some workers have been working, and like my daughter who works in the cafeteria, they've been giving out food every day, janitors every other week, the bus drivers. I understand that, but I just caution that we still take in consideration that some people, and because of this pandemic, it had put it on a lot of us, are socially, mentally, and emotionally drained and in fear. And we need to be careful that doesn't cause more mental breakdowns and more issues to come up into our school systems. So I ask that we be very, very careful. And I'm just so thankful. And I actually listened to what the budget committee has voted on to add. I know Dr. Golson has an opening plan, and we are definitely happy with it, but these added on precautions is for the safety, it's for the health and the welfare of not only our staff, not only our workers, but for the community and for the children. And I thank you guys, because I know you will definitely vote your heart.
Thank you, Board Member Queen. Next up is Board Member Nina Jackson, and then followed by Board Member Valentine. After that, I have no more hands up.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
I'm sorry, just before you start, we just have one more addition, Board Member Burrows. Go ahead, Board Member Jackson.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. For Dr. Golson, you provided quite a bit of commentary around OBAFA's second recommendation being the checklist, but I was wondering if there was any insight or commentary you had in regard to goals 1 and 3, just if they would in any way substantively alter the work the administration is currently doing regarding reopening, if they happen to overlap with work the administration is already doing, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So thank you for that question, Board Member Jackson. So the first one, around 100% of schools satisfy basic federal and state health and safety standards before beginning in person. We definitely are striving to accomplish that, and expect that we will, in order to ensure that we reopen on April 8th and April 15th. And we've just spoken on number 2, and that was around the health and safety checklist. And I shared about our school checklist readiness. And just do want to add that while you've referenced a specific document from CDC, CDC has several checklists, and there's another one that we'll be recommending that's a little different than the one here for the COVID compliance committees to look at when they're reviewing. And then the third one is, before the end of the school year, the 100% of schools will have conducted an in-person walkthrough with health officials, if available, and board members. That is the one item where I actually disagree.
but I do it for a variety of reasons. And the first one is that I am striving to limit the number of people who are in our school buildings. As I have stated, and it's also in our reopening guide, is that visitors must make an appointment, and we are limiting those visitors. Typically, when we have outsiders who come, they come directly to the main office or to the health suite. And so it's easier for us to track who they are. So the request here would mean that we'd have to put some very strict limitations. One recommendation is if you were to come, it would have to be 1 visit per day, because one, we needed to know who you have been in contact with prior to that, because it helps with contact tracing. 2, to make sure, though I can't ask you HIPAA requirements, we have done a concerted effort to ensure that 10,170 of our employees have received the vaccination. So I want to make sure that you are not entering our building where there are children who you may possibly affect as you're going from one classroom to the next. And 3, this sends a message that we don't value the leadership of the 206 amazing leaders that we have, that they have not done their due diligence to ensure that our buildings are ready. And so I say to you, I believe that with the COVID compliance committee, which is a representation of multiple staff members within that building that will meet weekly, along with our building principals and the responsiveness of our building services staff, that we will adhere to CDC guidelines, state and federal regulations, along with any school-specific issues on a weekly basis. So the need to have to add additional visitors to our schools to ensure that that is done in a one-shot visit is not necessarily what we're going to need to get through from April 8th until June 15th. We really are going to need the concerted efforts of our school teams that'll meet weekly to meet the needs of our students.
Thank you, Dr. Colson. And I do have one follow-up question. I know with Goal 3 from OBAFA, it has that piece about board members being able to walk the schools to document health and safety standards, but taking into account what you just said, are board members currently able to conduct a school visit with one of their schools if they so choose, or what does that currently look like?
So our current procedure allows our board members to visit any of their schools in their district. What the board member does is let me know, hey, I'm planning to go to, I don't know, Barack Obama tomorrow. And we just alert the principal to let them know that they're coming. That was the process before we entered COVID. And of course, now we do have a board member who does site visits right now virtually and has been able to successfully get to a large number of schools and still have that conversation with principals, get feedback. And with the ability of Zoom, you also have the ability to kind of walk the building with that administrator without physically being there. And that too is another option that's a safer option, which one of our board members has already utilized, which I strongly encourage our members to speak with to get the strategy of how they've utilized it, which is another option in lieu of having people in and out of our buildings.
Thank you, Dr. Golson. And I do want to, with that being said, I do want to give kudos to board member Queen, because I know she is the one conducting that abundance of stuff.
Thank you to our student board member and Posse Scholar winner, Ms. Nina Jackson. I appreciate your comments. Next up, we have Mr. Edward Burrows. Board member Burrows?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I did have some questions in response to some of the concerns that I've recently heard from some educators about the plan. I guess my first question is, if there is a school system employee with a pre-existing condition, what is our response around that? So for example, I received either email or a phone call from a parent whose teacher told, I guess, the whole class that she would not be coming back, and she felt like she was going to have to resign, and because she was going to have to come back. And I know we've worked very hard to get, you mentioned 10,000 people vaccinated, and so I know, we can't force people to be vaccinated or even get into their health business, but I guess I'm just trying to figure out that piece because I am sensitive to that.
Thank you for that question. So we're adhering to the American Disabilities Act provisions, which we use the acronym of ADA. Employees must complete the appropriate paperwork and submit that to our team, who then reviews it. And we utilize the guidelines established by CDC for those high risk underlying conditions that are prone to COVID-19 exposure. That list can be publicly accessed on the CDC website. It lists very specific underlying conditions. And so our team reviews that, responds back to that ADA compliance request based on the adherence to that list for consistency across the district.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing that I didn't know of, and clearly this teacher didn't know about. And so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I got the same email, and we did follow up. That teacher had not completed the ADA accommodations requirement paperwork. And so in any case, whenever you receive those concerns, please direct them to complete the paperwork and submit it, and consult with me, and I can lead them to the CDC document, which is public, that lets them know what conditions are identified as high risk.
Thank you. And then also, I know you're still working to allow additional folks to get vaccinated, their first dose.
Well, actually, we have completed all of our slots and have provided them to every employee. We actually still have about 80 slots that are vacant. So we have been able to offer to all employees, substitutes, and temporary workers, which has allowed us to get to the 10,170 people who would have received the first dose of the vaccine.
Got it. Okay. And I appreciate your work there. I know you kind of worked around the clock a few weeks ago, working to arrange that very important piece, because I know a lot of folks would not feel comfortable coming back if they didn't have the vaccine or access to the vaccine.
I fully understand that. When we did our survey in January, we had 8,547 or 57 people who were interested in it. And I am grateful we were able to do an additional 1,500 with thanks to the Prince George's County Health Department and our county executive.
Okay, and I just got a note. Can you ask the CEO where the forms can be found for teachers to complete?
Yep, if they go to the Return to Work Guide, which can be found in the staff portal, they have access to all that information.
Okay, and then if I understand you correctly, it sounds like you're okay with the OBAF committee recommendation 1 and 2. It sounds like they were already going to be in the plan, but number 3, having it sounds like you would be okay with board members doing these virtual visits that Board Member Queen is currently doing.
That is accurate.
And so I guess I would just ask if the committee chair would be open to that friendly amendment, just so that we're all we can do this together.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my hesitation, Mr. Burrows, I mean, I'm thinking about it like I want the board to have 100% confidence in this plan. I mean, it seems reasonable to me. If board members aren't going to intentionally be making the situation worse, but I think it's reasonable nonetheless, right, for board members to be able to walk these schools if they so choose.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything that.
I don't think this has anything to do with what's reasonable. It has to do with the fact that we still are in a COVID-19 experience, and I'm doing everything possible to make sure that in the event that there are some non-regular adults that we have to contact trace, that we know where every person has been prior to entering our buildings. So I'm fine if you do not want to make a revision to it. No problem. And we'll just move forward with the voting process.
I guess I would just say, if there was a way to kind of work this out, my time is up.
Any more? I see 3 other hands.
We do. Sorry, Dr. Miller. I'm sorry. I was on mute. I have Board Member Queen and Board Member Adam Stafford for their second round, and Curtis Valentine for his first round. So I'm going to leapfrog Curtis Valentine so we can close out this first round of questioning. Board Member Valentine.
Thank you. And thank you to Dr. Golson and her team for putting this together. I just want to, be really clear. When the governor set this deadline and really took the power away from us as board members and Dr. Golson as the CEO, I admonished that. I think we all should have, because he is the one who put us in this position. And in many ways, we didn't have to be here, but we were here because of overreach from the governor. And so I just want to be unequivocal about that. I also want to understand that, my board colleague, Adam Stafford, said something really clear. She says, this is a family decision. And when I vote on issues around the board, and I've been very vocal about this since I've been on the board, and people may sound like I'm a broken record, but when I vote on this, I'm voting to send my wife into a school, one of the most densely populated schools in the district. And so anything that happens in that school building is going to come back to Curtis Valentine. And this vote is going to impact me long after this board meeting is over and we've moved on to another issue. And so when I look at this plan, I'm saying, is this going to keep school leaders like my wife safe, other educators, students like my children? I am the parent appointee of the county council to the school board. At the time I was appointed to the school board, there were no parents of public school students on the school board in 2013. And so this is very, very serious to me. Very serious. And so when I engage with the CEO's office, when I hear her experience as a former school leader and a parent of a PTCPS student, and to understand how communicative she's been, how responsive she's been, and how transparent she's been, people can question my support for the CEO and her plan. And I have not agreed with her 100%. But there are times when you say, this is a plan that, again, nothing is perfect in a pandemic. It's just not. And we shouldn't be here because the governor did something I believe he should not have done. But is this going to keep my wife safe? Yes, I believe so. Is it going to keep me safe when she comes home at night? Yes, I believe so. And so I agree with this report. And after this report is passed, whether we have amendments or not, we will continue to hold the CEO accountable at every episode. And when things arise and she has to close the school down, I want to standing right by her and tell everyone, yes, we had to close the school down because it was safety first. We don't do anything in a pandemic that's not safety first. And that's why I stand with the CEO, because she said safety first, and that's what the plan says. And so that's what I wanted to say. This is a family vote, and when I'm voting for families just like mine throughout the county.
Dr. Golson, we've heard a lot this evening in reference to safety and staff returning. And we heard about PGCEA's concerns. ASASP, have they taken a position in that principals have been coming all year? From my understanding, they have been already returned to the building and been coming. The custodial staff, even though they don't come under ASASP, but I'm just trying to get a feel for, why one group is more resistant than the group that's been coming all along.
So there are a total of 4 labor partners that we work with, and 3 labor partner staff have been in our buildings since the closure in March. Those are our food service workers who have are our frontline workers and have distributed more than 1.5 million meals since last March. Our building custodians who, while we were at shelter at home, were still working in our facilities, as well as many of our bus drivers, when we reopened, helped to deliver meals to neighborhoods where students could not walk to a neighborhood school within 1.5 miles. Along with school administrators were in those buildings. And remember, there were still times where we still had to receive mail, receive packages. We distributed laptops, we distributed hotspots, we provided books. All of that took place from members from ASASP, Local 400, and 2250. And so I did release a video where I shared with staff today, 27% of our staff have been in buildings across this district throughout this pandemic. And everyone's safety is a priority. It's not one group over the other. We are one PGCPS. We are 20,000 employees strong. We started this pandemic with 20,000. We're going to end it together with 20,000, even in the spirit of those that we've lost through COVID.
Thank you. Just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. We have 4 more board members who have raised their hand to speak. And we have 2 board members that are still in the round 1. First up is Board Member Harris.
Thanks for acknowledging me. I'll make it really quick. Dr. Golson, I know there's a few responses floating around, but can you provide some clarification on the case-by-case basis for our teachers and educators who are the sole provider for either elderly parents or elderly family members, and they have to report back to the school building with reopening?
Yep. So there was a provision under the CARES Act leave that allowed families who had that situation to remain home. That CARES Act leave concluded December 31st, 2020, and that provision is no longer available.
Okay. And one follow-up question. With the options that our teachers have available, is Prince George's County Public School keeping a track of which teachers have opted to retire, resign, or return to the buildings?
We would always have a paper trail of that because they have to go in Oracle to complete retirement paperwork in order to have American with Disabilities Act accommodations. They have to actually complete the form for that. And if they were to resign, they would also notify us of that in Oracle as well.
Okay. Is there somewhere in terms of percentage-wise that board members can look at that data?
Once we get to a point where all teachers have returned into our buildings, I will have no problem providing that in the weekly update.
Okay.
So I would look forward to presenting that in April.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Board Member Harris. Next up for the first round is Board Member Boozer Strother.
Thank you so much. I also, along the lines of Mr. Valentine, wanted to vote for this plan, Dr. Goldson's plan, because my son is returning to 5th grade virtual and hybrid. He will be returning to the building, and my confidence is very, very high. And as a board member, I've attended many of the forums so far with parents and principals at the elementary, middle, and high school. And with each of those demonstrations of preparations for what we're calling Ready to Open, my confidence is growing. And I hope we can start to turn our attention to who we're opening these buildings for. We're opening them for 32% of our children who need to return. Every single parent who is making this decision has made it knowing the risks, but this is what our children need. The 68% of the children not returning, the parents made that decision for very important reasons to their families. They have chosen that their children will stay home, and we all respect each other. And all of us in our individual school communities respect each other. And I think now we need to turn our attention to how we as parents and families are preparing to be the safest we can be before we have our children re-enter buildings. The pledges we are making around how to stay safe and not contribute to the spread as best we can and as best our situations allow. And so I hope that we don't lose sight tonight about how Dr. Goldson has led a community of confidence for a year. And I fully trust her plan. I've watched Dr. Goldson respond to feedback month after month. It's still responding to feedback and adjusting and making this the safest reopening possible. And I want to say thank you, Dr. Goldson. And I just want to say to my colleagues, let's start thinking about our children and why they need to come back to the buildings. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Board Member Shepherd. Now starting round 2 is Board Member Queen, followed by Board Member Adam Stafford, and then I'll put myself in for the third, as the third board member to speak. Board Member Queen.
Thank you. I'm fanning in the background because I'm trying not to get too emotional. So first of all, I just want to say, yes, I'm the board member that has been doing virtual tours, but it wasn't by my first choice. I asked my principals and I gave them the option of virtual or in-school visits. Some of my principals choose in-school visits and some wanted virtual. I had no problem with that. But before my first visit, I and my whole household, even my 8-year-old grandbaby, ended up with COVID. And yes, it shut my household down. So I understand people's fear. Not just that, my grandbaby had no symptoms. A lot of us didn't even have the symptoms, but we had COVID, and all because one person got sick in the family, but the rest of us didn't really have the major symptoms. A week later, I end up with major symptoms, and to this date, because I have lupus, I'm still under doctor care. I want to thank Dr. Golson, who knew and kept checking on me, and Rahila. But COVID is real, you guys. It is real to a lot of family, and people who have underlying medical conditions like me, it's real. That's all I can say, because I'm going through major issues from COVID. So I understand the teacher's fear. I also understand that Dr. Golson is doing what she has to do because she's been given a direct order. But we must understand that everybody cannot. It's going to be some people who's able. My husband has worked through this whole pandemic besides when he got COVID. But he's back out there working again. It's going to be some people. So has my daughter. She's worked for the school system until she got COVID and she had to come out. But it will be some people who's able to do that. And then it's some people who will be not. And we need to learn to respect the ones and understand the ones that cannot, and understand how important it is for us to make sure that we are doing everything we can so we will lose no one else unnecessary for the school system. The next thing I want to ask the question is about the ADA and FMLA. Is the school system covered under the FMLA Medical Leave Act? Because that's another way people can be covered, which is a federal leave act for most people. So I actually definitely check into that. And I want us to be very careful in closing, because students are going to return in April. As we all know, April is allergy season. I'm very skeptical about that, okay? And as I said, my 8-year-old grandbaby had no symptoms, around here just fine, but she tested positive. Kids can bring it back and it can affect other kids. So we need to be very careful when we are making these decisions. So when I sent you guys the email out yesterday and said we need to lead by example, I meant it. As a board member, we should start back in meetings in March the 25th, and we expect teachers to come back. But what happened? A lot of you were hesitant about coming back. So I'll say it again, the same thing I said in the email. Put yourself in other people's shoes. If you have hesitance, why do you think they won't have hesitation? Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Board Member Adam Stafford.
Thank you. And thank you, Board Member Queen, for sharing that. And I think that her sentiments are what a lot of people in our community are feeling, right? That they're having this hesitancy, and all they're asking for is more information and wanting to have even greater transparency. And I think that we can all agree that Dr. Goldson and her team have been, transparent from the beginning. They have shared information. They've, led from the front. And I think that having checklists posted in a fashion that will be, accessible to not only board members, but to community members, to ensure that families can make that strong decision and know with confidence and have those questions answered, and they'll know the members of their school community and their school COVID committee. And if their school has a COVID committee, and if that committee has done walkthroughs, those are all questions that we as parents have. And so having that information available, I think, is really the goal of the amendments. And so I just wanted to make a friendly amendment because I really think that we can pass this unanimously with these amendments. I just want to make an amendment that we take out the third portion of the recommendation to have board members conduct visits in person. And I think that we as board members should just make that our own, just due diligence to do those visits virtually. Thinking about what Dr. Goldson has shared in terms of her concerns, and get out into our communities and do those virtual visits so that we can not take away from the work that's being done, but to, further support and amplify and do what we were elected and appointed to do, which is, to really ensure that those schools are safe. And that's really what our role in our job is. So if that amendment would be accepted, I think that we as a board can show how we can come together and not only pass this, but pass it with even greater transparency.
I'll accept that amendment, Ms. Adams Stafford.
Thank you, Board Member Murray.
Thank you. So if I understand correctly, this isn't my time. We're striking the third amendment.
Yes, the third portion of the amendment. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For my comment, I just want to thank Dr. Golson, as my other board members have conveyed, for all the hard work that you have done since we entered into COVID. If everyone remembers, about a year ago this time, we literally had an exec session meeting where we just discussed, when COVID gets to Maryland, we will really begin to jump into it. When we got into the general meeting, all of our phones were buzzing because there was a COVID case in Maryland. We had to return to the exec session where Dr. Golson immediately implemented the COVID reaction plan, which was to send every child home on that Friday with everything they can carry, because Monday we were not coming back. During this whole time, Dr. Golson has spent an unlimited amount of time. I don't know how she's able to sit here every day with us to discuss this, because she spent an unlimited amount of time talking to experts, talking to our labor partners, talking to community partners to put together a plan that will keep our community safe as we reopen the buildings. And as a matter of fact, she shared with us just recently that her plan, the plan for Prince George's County Public Schools was rated one of the top 3 in the state. And so that says a lot, that in the state of Maryland, under the mandate of Governor Hogan making us come back into the school building, our reopening plan was one of the top. So I congratulate you, Dr. Golson, and your staff for pulling together and working closely with experts to ensure that we have a plan to implement that is safe for our kids to return. Now, the plan is just a plan. It's just a bunch of words. And I've said that before in these meetings. It is about us working together collectively, doing our individual responsible actions to ensure that we keep students and the community safe. We all know what to do. It is wearing your mask, social distancing, and washing your hands constantly. And I believe in the plan, actually, I'm for certain, in the plan, we have that in the plan laid out. All of us are anxious. I'm anxious every day when I go out to the grocery store and say, "Oh, is my throat scratchy?" Because I'm concerned. But I know we have to get back to some form of normal, and that starts today. Looking at the numbers, we have 10% of the state of Maryland's population that has been vaccinated with the vaccine. Our numbers are concerning because we have our community has high issues with our health. So it takes us individually making decisions, and thankfully we as parents can decide whether or not we're going to send our kids back into the school building. We're able to do that. I have a friend who lives in Texas. They didn't have that option. Their students have been in school throughout this whole pandemic. But what we know for certain, through science, that schools are not a high concentration, a hotspot for COVID. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Dr. Golson, for all of your work.
I ditto that.
Thank you.
Are there any more speakers? If not, then we can move on to a vote. Ms. Berkeley, would you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Adams Stafford.
I just want to make sure we're voting on this plus the amendments. Could you read the entire motion? Because just want to make sure.
It's the motion to accept consent agenda item 5.1 as amended by the OBAFA committee through the goals outlined, except we're striking goal number 3. So, a vote for aye would be approving this amendment, approving this item, and nay would be not.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. So aye. Thank you.
And I'd like to also indicate that there will need to be a 2/3 vote to do so, or a total of 9 votes. Ms. Berkeley?
Mrs. Adam Stafford,
Aye.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Yes.
Ms. Boozer Strother,
Yes.
Mr. Burrows,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson,
I would like to get the advice of council first, just to ask if this is a matter I can vote on.
He wrote a note, the issue of reopening falls under operations of plant. The CEO is authorized to oversee the operations of plant as part of her day-to-day management and oversight of this activity.
I think this is, sorry, Dr. Miller.
No, if I could clarify, Madam Chair, the issue before the board is one involving school reopenings. That's one of the specific categories where the student board member unfortunately would not be permitted to vote. So that was the basis of that issue.
So the
Wait a minute, are you saying that the student cannot vote?
That is correct, because it is a matter involving school reopening. So under the statute, the student board member is not permitted to vote on that unless the board states otherwise.
Okay, because you indicated in my notes that it falls under operations of plant. So
Now, that's with respect to the requirement for a 2/3 vote to take action contrary to the recommendation of the CEO.
I see. Okay.
All right.
So just for clarification, I'm sorry, just for clarification, this is a vote on the plan. The schools are open. We're just opening the buildings. So I just want to confirm that is the case.
Yeah, so let me be clear about that too. In the context of the process for returning students to in-person learning in the schoolhouse setting, as you all know, that has consistently across the board been referred to reopening plans. So that's the basis upon which I've given it that classification and concluded that the student board member vote should not count under those circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Berkeley?
Yes, ma'am.
You may
Mr. Montero,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mrs. Queen,
Aye.
Mrs. Shepherd,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
No.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
and Dr. Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. We have 12 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 unable to vote.
So the motion carries to amend.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
Dr. Miller? Can I
Yes.
change my vote? I'll change my vote to make it unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Then this is a unanimous vote for us for the recommendation to accept the CEO's recommendations with the amendments, the 2 amendments. Motion carries. Okay, next is the budget consent agenda. Did someone have something to say?
Nope, I was getting ready to introduce it. I apologize.
Okay, well, go ahead, Dr. Golson. Please introduce item 6.1.
Item 6.1 requires board approval of the employee evaluation performance grown platform system. Thank you.
May I have a motion to approve the budget consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and second. Is there discussion?
I just have a quick comment. I think that, you know, we're always asking about evaluation of the service that we deliver to students. And I think this is a great platform, especially since it has that dashboard that we will be able to go down to the teacher level to evaluate the service that we're delivering. So I appreciate this being offered, and the fact that we will be able to look at this in different sites. Like, you don't have to be at the building, where now we're trying to compile all of those evaluations into one source. This is done electronically. So I think this is going to be amazing for us to track the progress of the service that we're delivering to students. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Okay, next we'll move into governance. This is the second reader of unfinished business. Policy 5113, student attendance, absence, and truancy. Board Member Ahmed, as a committee chair, would you please present the recommendation from the Policy and Governance Committee?
Yes, colleagues, the Policy and Governance Committee met virtually on February 1st, 2021, with the following members in attendance: myself as committee chair, Mr. Thomas as committee vice chair, Mr. Burrows, Ms. Boozer-Struther, and Ms. Jackson. Ms. Queen also attended as a guest. At that meeting, we discussed Policy 5113, which is student attendance, absence, and truancy. And the committee voted unanimously to recommend to the full Board of Education that the policy be accepted for first reader and then for second reader. I do want to note this, you've probably seen this before. It's because we sent it out for public comment. We've actually had a lot of conversation and discussion around this particular policy. And one of the really cool things that this policy will do, besides putting in our new format and making sure that we're using language from state law, is that it shows and it explicitly says the board's strong support to add additional reasons for lawful absences, specifically broadening the definition of family to include extended family, relatives, and close non-relatives whose death would permit students to be lawfully excused from schools, as well as military-related visits, college visits, civic engagement activities, and student mental health days. So what we're doing in passing this policy will allow for all of those things, for the board's position on all of those things to be known and codified. With that, Madam Chair, I move on behalf of the committee to approve this policy.
Okay, is there no second is required because it was moved on behalf of the committee. Therefore, is there any discussion?
Board
Member Valentine.
Thank you. It's questions to my board colleague, Ahmed. And so in theory, I don't disagree with your proposition. My question is around the legality of it and how the state would view it as relates to the requirement for 180 days and other restrictions the state may put on excused absences. And so is that in line just before I make my vote?
Sure. So in the additional, and this is listed in the policy, in addition to the categories of lawful absences identified in state law, the CEO is authorized to identify other emergencies or sets of circumstances which constitutes a good and sufficient cause for absence from school. So what this policy says is the board strongly supports the CEO's consideration of additional reasons for lawful absences, including all of what I had just mentioned. So this is how it aligns with state law.
Okay, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is to Dr. Goldson and the administration. I know with the alteration of this specific policy, we included language expressing that the board, in theory, would support the addition of student mental health days. My colleagues may know that I've been a strong advocate and proponent for that as well. And so I was just wondering from administration if this is something that you all have considered before, if you've begun to look at what that may look like, and so on and so forth.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Jackson. I actually went back to look at notes. I want to say from September, and thank you, Board Member Boozer Strother, for directing me in the correct location where we actually had this discussion with you early on. I have asked our general counsel to go back and look at adding in 2 mental health days, one per semester, but then also adding for students, but then also adding in a measure where if a student takes that time, then that triggers some additional support, either through a professional school counselor or a mental health provider, to find out what that student needs in order to support them and strategies to help them to navigate through the educational experience if they needed to take those days.
Really exciting. Thank you, Dr. Golson.
You're welcome. Thank you for bringing that back to my attention.
Any further discussion?
I just have one question. I just wanted to get clarification, and just so that the public is aware. What is the difference between a lawful and unlawful excuse? From a student's perspective, what happens when they're in a lawful excuse of absence versus an unlawful excuse of absence?
So I'm gonna do the really quick Cliff Note version of it. Unlawful, you can't make the school work up that you missed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Lawful, you can make it up, which means
Okay.
ultimately that affects your grades.
Okay, thank you very much. And is there a maximum amount of time that a student can be out of school with lawful and or unlawful excused absences before they're moved into another category?
So yes, the Maryland State Department of Education has identified chronic absenteeism as 9 or more lawful or unlawful absences. Well, it's actually 10 unlawful absences, and they could be lawful or unlawful. So while we have expanded many more opportunities for students to miss school, know that this will affect school star ratings because it will have an impact on their chronic absenteeism rate.
So just for clarification, regardless of whether it's lawful or unlawful, if a student misses 10 days, then they're considered a chronic absentee student.
Correct.
And that not only affects the student, but it affects the star rating of the entire school system.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Of that individual school.
And of that individual school. Okay, thank you very much. So this is really an impactful decision that a student is making when they are absent from school. So thank you very much. And Dr. Miller, I see that there are one hand up, and it's from Board Member Adam Stafford.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to point out, and I'm very happy to see how culturally responsive this policy is in expanding the definition of family and thinking about, our communities that we serve, and that, this type of definition allows for more flexibility and reality, and really speaks to the reality of the lives of many of our students. So I wanted to just appreciate that. I wanted to ask about the terms lawful and unlawful, and if are we also using terms in terms of like excused and unexcused? And I guess my my question about this is, as we've talked a lot about the school to prison pipeline, the nomenclature of things also does play into how students feel about themselves, how students understand their role within the school. And terms like this, which are, a bit antiquated, if there is possibility for us to change those terms to be more updated, such as excused and unexcused absences, I think that could just be a small thing. It may seem like to some, but as someone who's been an educator for over a decade and worked in schools, that are seeking to make some of these changes and moving towards ending, policies and procedures that reinforce that type of system, I think that could be one small thing that we do to support that.
Madam Chair, if I could add a point of clarification here. The committee did talk about this specifically. It must have been months ago at this point. Other members of the committee can address and attest to it if I'm saying something out of turn or something like that. But we had discussed this. The reason or the rationale for keeping this language was due to the fact that the state uses these terms in law. And that's why those terms translated into this. But we did have a conversation around using those terms, and I wanted to make sure that that was known to other members of the board and you as well.
So I guess my question is, just because that is used within the law, does that mean that we have to use that within our district?
That's an excellent question.
Is it something that we've just done for a long time, or is it something that we have the power to change? Because I think that we as a county can be ahead of, if other counties are not doing that and it's not required, why not make that small change? Because absenteeism is so closely linked to so many other aspects of the school to prison pipeline. A small change like this on our end, I think that we could lead the way by making that change.
Well, the consistency that Board Member Ahmed is speaking of also is alignment with truancy, which is considered illegal, and then requires another action on the parent to report to court and then actually have charges pressed against them if they don't have their child report. So when they discussed this a couple of months ago, it really was around making sure we didn't change language that would confuse families to know that when you've triggered an illegal action, that there will be another action that follows behind that. And that really comes not necessarily on the adult. On the child, that falls on the adult because it's the parent's responsibility to get that child to school. At least up to a certain age.
Well, I'll just say that I think that, just because it has been so and it has been that way for a very long time doesn't mean that we can't change that trajectory. I think that families discuss and talk about when they get a truancy letter, they're going to have that discussion that this means we're going to court, or this means that, we're in big trouble or something is about to happen. And so I don't know that having the name lawful and unlawful will take away the gravity of what it means to be chronically absent. And so I would just ask if it is possible for us to do something in changing that nomenclature. I think it is very antiquated and something that we have the power to change.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Any more discussion? I see another hand.
Yes, it's Board Member Queen.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to the conversation of what Board Member Stafford was just talking about and shine on another light, you guys. I guess because I've been out here in the community and I've experienced a lot of these things as a person who was born, raised so many kids. And so I do understand her point of view, and I want you to understand that. And I know, Dr. Golson, you said it'll hold the parents accountable, but everybody is not a parent. I raised 21 kids, 11 were foster kids, 9 were step kids. And my foster guardianship kids, even when they didn't get up, I couldn't go down there and drag them out the bed and make them get up, and I had issues with them getting to school. And we must realize that some things have to be taken into consideration. Not even 2 years ago, one of my kids that is no longer with me, I went through that to try to get her to school, you guys, and you guys don't understand what some parents go through. She tore my house up, my basement up, and cut my clothes up. So let's be realistic. You don't know what parents go through trying to raise other people's kids to do right in the system. So sometimes we have to take into consideration every child is not being raised by their parent. They're being raised by grandparents. They're being raised by auntie and uncles and other people. And the people who are raising them have so much limit they can do, but they're trying their best to make sure their child get everything they need to be educated and to be a productive citizen. But it takes all of us to do this together. It takes the person who is willing to stand up and take that child in their home and take them in and try to help them. But it takes us as a school system and as community leaders to do the same thing and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that they are able to succeed. So I just wanted to add that we need to be very careful when we're talking about kids that need us. They need each and every one of us to make sure that we're giving them guidance. So when we sit on this board, let's not realize that every household is not gold. Let's be realistic. It's issues in people's household, and people are going through, and it's real. And a lot of it is with their children. So let's not really think that we're all perfect parents and we got that perfect household and we got that perfect child, because that's not realistic.
Thank you. Any more discussions?
I see no more hands, Dr. Miller.
Okay. So can we move for, are we ready for the vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries.
Could I just add, would it be possible for us to discuss at another time the changing of those terms? Would that be a policy committee topic or?
Yes, I can commit to having that added to a future policy committee meeting agenda.
Thanks.
With that, we'll move into 7.2, Science of Reading Work Group Proposal. Board Member Murray, as committee chair, would you please present the recommendation from the Operations, Budget, and Fiscal Committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I'm very excited to bring forth this proposal tonight. Those of you that I'm close to on the board know that I talk about this absolutely all the time. That's something that's really a byproduct of my work as a classroom teacher. Now in my 4th year in the classroom, the things that I have learned, the things that I wish I knew. You know, as some of our speakers tonight touched on, it's not a problem that's exists only in Prince George's. It's a problem across this country and across this world, but one that we need to lead in, which is the fact that, you know, right now only about 1 in every 3 of our kids reads on grade level. And that the fact that that has been that way for so long and that it's been accepted as the norm and the reality is not okay. There's a lot of emerging science about what are the right and wrong ways to teach reading. And I've been a product of both. I've taught reading the wrong way and I've taught it the right way. And I've realized that there are some ways that we're really setting our students up to fail. I'm really proud about the fact that I have some really amazing advocates that have signed on to help me do this work group. I'm really excited about the outcomes that are going to come from it so that we can make sure that Prince George's is a leader in instructional reading best practices, not only in our state, but in our country. I'm very excited that this is finally here for second reader. Would open any questions on it and hopefully can get a unanimous support for this.
Okay, the recommendation has been moved on behalf of the committee.
Dr. Miller, we have one comment from Board Member Joshua Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to just first applaud and appreciate my colleague, Mr. Murray. I know, as he made in his remarks, that folks who are close to him can attest to the fact that this is something he talks about quite often. That is 100% true. We have had many conversations on this matter, and as the only current educator on our board, I do really look to you as a source of some expertise on this matter. So I just appreciate you bringing this forward. I think this is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that our school system needs. I just had really a question about the timeline. I know that ultimately the main outcomes of this work group is to provide recommendations to the board and to the school system. What do you expect is going to be like the timeline by which we'll be able to get those kinds of recommendations? And do you anticipate that this will then have implications on the 2022 to 2023 fiscal year budget?
Thank you. I appreciate those comments and that question. We're going to try to work as diligently as possible. Obviously, we've been delayed a bit for matters outside of my hands. The group of advocates is really excited to get to work on it. We're going to work really diligently and try to make some quicker recommendations in the next 1 to 2 to 3 months. But it honestly is a really big undertaking. I'm trying to rethink the way that we teach pre-K through 3rd graders to read. It's something that we need to lead from the top down, but also something that we're going to have to work alongside our teachers from the ground up to get them to really buy into. And so I think there definitely will be some budgetary impacts, but also just kind of some changes in thinking and professional development and all those things. So it's going to be a long process, but we're going to try to get it up to speed as quickly as possible.
That's great. Thanks for that. And I was trying to read in the proposal. I didn't know that it states the members at the bottom. I'm just curious. You mentioned working with teachers in our system. Are some of those people actually teachers of K-3, just for the public?
I can't remember. I know we have some people with teaching experience on there. Honestly, this is, a group of people who are like most willing and have, helped me put this together. But obviously it's going to be open to absolutely any and everyone because, we want experiences for people that are working our school system right now. So I just look at this as kind of a core group, but absolutely anybody is willing. Hopefully people, will be watching tonight and reach out and be interested in serving and helping out as well.
Awesome. Thanks. Yep. I couldn't agree more that getting our kids on grade reading level is probably one of the biggest priorities we should have as a school board and as a school system. So I'm glad to support this work group. Appreciate your work. That is all my comments and questions.
There are 3 other people with their hands up and I can't identify them.
So Dr. Miller, I was next, and then we have Board Member Valentine, Board Member Adam Stafford, and then Board Member Queen.
Thank you.
My comment, I guess Board Member Thomas kind of touched on my question. In accordance with Policy 8100, in order to have a work group, you have to have 3 things, a scope and a list of your people that will be participating with their resumes, and also a schedule. And so it wasn't clear when you said 1, 2, or 3 months, and then you talked about this being a very challenging topic. I think it's important that we understand as a board when we can expect something to come through, and because there is some timelines in the policy that must be followed. Because halfway through your schedule, the focus work group is supposed to present a progress report to the board and the community. So it's important that we have that timeline down. So as soon as you get that timeline, it's important that you share it with us and that we inform the public so they can know what to expect as well. So my main question though, is about the fiscal note that's attached to it. When we created the focus work group, there wasn't really, the goal wasn't really to have a fiscal note attached to the focus work group. So can you talk about how the contracting will occur, and will this process be transparent and competitive?
So yes, we're going to follow all relevant school system procedures, as I have on prior contracts that have been kind of unilaterally delayed. So both procurement, general counsel, board counsel, all of which will look over absolutely anything before it comes to the board, as has been the process I've followed for past projects.
So will this be a competitive process?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because it definitely may delay your schedule if it's going to be competitive to put this request for proposal out and to get it back and then start whatever you're going to use the $100,000 for. Can you explain to me how the $100,000 was derived?
Yeah, I agree. And then, if the board can continue to meet regularly, it will help. It will help me in moving this work group forward, as it will with a lot of things that have been in front of the board.
So, but the work group has nothing to do with board meetings. We just need to know.
No, the work group's being approved tonight on second reader at a board meeting. So it had to get started. The board had to approve it, which is why it's up for approval tonight and not previously.
I'm speaking in terms of the schedule for competitively bidding the $100,000 out, and can you explain how you derived at the $100,000?
Yeah, it was just a amount that I felt was a good competitive number to get someone qualified and competent to help us look at what is a very large school system and large literacy program, and making sure that we're making the right investments up front, and that this committee of volunteers has some professional support behind it.
Okay, definitely. I'd like to stay close to it, because as our responsibility of the board is the fiscal oversight of budgetary matters, especially when it comes to those actions that the board is leading. So thank you very much. Next up, we have Board Member Valentine, followed by Board Member Adam Stafford, followed by Board Member Queen. Board Member Valentine?
Thank you. And I think my colleague, Board Member Joshua Thomas, sort of touched on it, which was the selection process for the 5 individuals and sort of what their background is and expertise in this subject. So can you just discuss again how those members were selected, what their expertise is, and then also how others can get involved? But also, if you can get a little more in depth about, the scope of work for whoever you plan to award this, or we plan to award this $100,000 contract to, the duration, the scope of work, the deliverables, and again, 100,000 is a pretty arbitrary number, but whether you're willing to just to remove that, because again, it does seem arbitrary at a time when we're going to be in a fiscal crisis moving forward. And so I just want to, again, be very, thoughtful and mindful of the budget. At the same time, I 1000% agree with the spirit of the working group and the need for it. But we've had similar, not groups around reading in particular, but we've had community members and partners who volunteered to become members of advisory boards at little cost to the system. We have people in our county who are tremendous assets and are willing and able to step forward and volunteer, and will do so at little cost. I just think we can be a little more fiscally responsible as it relates to this. So there's the 3 questions I had. 1, how'd you come up with these 5 members, and what is their background? 2, how can others who aren't on that list get involved? And 3, how do you plan to spend $100,000, and why wasn't that sort of internally looked at for someone who could do it in the county for much less money?
So to your first question, it's a combination of community members that either reached out to me that I came into contact with through my reading advocacy work across the county and state. It's 100%, as I say to Ms. Williams, open for others to join in. We need all the expertise we can get. The public can contact me, through the school board website and email me. I would be happy to have any additional participants. As it relates to the fiscal note, so nothing's being given out tonight. It's just kind of leaving that balance in reserve. We have a line item for it in the Board of Education's budget already for contracts. I think that we could potentially use someone who has national expertise in curricula that could come in and evaluate what we currently have, what are best practices across the system. I think that we have a great group of volunteers that are going to get us off to a great start. Also recognizing that trying to improve reading literacy of like the 20th biggest school district in America is not a fly-by-night operation. It's a very serious endeavor. And I mean, we have, as you know, a $2 billion budget that currently is only set up for proficiency of 1 in 3 students to read. And so I cannot in good conscience let another year go by in which we are not making every single effort that we can to attack that. And this is my proposal to best do that. And if other board members have other proposals to address literacy rates, not something I've heard a lot of talk about, frankly, on our board, then I'm open to that. But this is kind of my plan to drive that forward based on my experience as a classroom teacher.
I have one follow-up question, and not to you, Mr. Murray. It's actually to Dr. Golson. One, there's a contention made about the reading levels of our district, and I wanted you to sort of comment on that. But 2, do you have anyone within our school system, within your staff, who could support this working group, which would at no cost, additional cost to the system?
Oh, definitely. We have some amazing staff in curriculum and instruction. And right now, Maryland State Department of Education is already auditing our K-5 reading English language arts curriculum. So we would not need to pay someone else to do that when Maryland State Department of Education is doing that. And then I do want to say in our last MCAP data, though we don't have any for this school year, clearly, thankful that we are waiving that. We have had increases in reading English language arts in all grade levels. So I would want to make sure that we don't send a message that the information that you just shared, Board Member Murray, that information is not accurate when you said only 1, 2, 3 kids excelling in reading.
So So to be clear, I mean, it's kind of what I tried to touch. This isn't an indictment on anything PGCPS specific. We know that in America, nationally, many, the majority of students are not reading on grade level. This is an effort to say that we don't think that that is acceptable, that we think that we can do better. And so this isn't necessarily, it's not an indictment on PGCPS, an indictment on MSD. This is saying that I believe that more of our students can read proficiently if we follow the science of how to teach reading. And that is the goal of this work group.
So are you using any data to substantiate the need for your program?
Point of order, Dr. Miller. I believe there were others that were in line.
I apologize. I didn't see the
Sorry,
hand.
Dr. Miller. I'm sorry, Dr. Miller. I didn't want to interrupt you as the chair of the board. We do have board member Adam Stafford, board member Queen, followed by board member Joshua Thomas. Board member Adams, okay.
Yeah, thank you. I just can't underscore enough how important literacy is on so many levels. And I think that often as students get older and they encounter other teachers of other subjects, teachers will say, well, I'm not a reading teacher, right? And so that's not my background. And so having dedicated research to how to teach reading to our youngest readers when they are really sponges and need that support, I think that will have long-term benefits for our school system. And while there might be already efforts underway, I don't think it could hurt for us to laser focus on this and think about how can we ensure that our students are entering second and third grade on grade level and seeing major gains within their reading and literacy skills. You know, literacy really is the gateway to understanding all content areas in all subjects. You know, when students can decode and break down complex and rigorous text, that is really what schooling is. And so having an intense focus on that, I think that this can only set us up for success. And so, you know, I just, you know, hope that, you know, as we're looking at what we currently offer and what the possibilities are, that we'll be able to come out with a really robust and strong plan that will put us above where we currently are. So those are my comments.
Next.
Thank you, board member Adam Stafford. Thank you, board member Adam Stafford. We have board member Queen up next, followed by board member Joshua Thomas, followed by board member Curtis Valentine, and I would like to be follow board member Valentine.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair. I just want to say to board member Murray, thank you for wanting to help those who are in need of reading. And one of the things that you said really stuck with me, that maybe some staff members may just need development. I know some people are just good at, and it was mentioned by another board member, I believe, maybe more good at math or another subject, social study or science, and then them actually more better at teaching reading. But you do see a need for some kids who are falling behind that need help. I do want to say though, it's good for us to help the ones who are in need, but I do have to say that some students are really doing good. My 8-year-old granddaughter does really well. Her teacher at John Payne, I have to shout out Ms. Hayes, is just awesome. Didn't know, to be honest, if I was gonna like her in the beginning, but what I see her do with them kids is just amazing. And not just her, they work as a team, her and some of the other teachers. But they get on iRead, they get on Scholastics. My grandbaby not only read, they get on there and they get to typing. And some of the things she's typing, you guys, it made me realize, okay, I didn't take typing until the 9th grade. And y'all remember them big old fat typewriters we used to have to pluck on. But these kids are typing them words out. The words come up on the system and they got to repeat the words and type it. They're getting this typing skills at an early age. And they're learning to read the words and pronounce the words. And then they get the words in the book. So they're getting it. I mean, she's getting it and she's reading the books fast. But then I had a parent call me this week who had, and kid goes to the same school, and I just won't say, but her son is having problem with reading, is not getting the reading. So where I see, and I know my granddaughter is getting it from one teacher, apparently another teacher is not getting it. So maybe it is some type of development that is needed upon staff to make sure that every child does get it. And that's all I want to say. Thank you so much. Oh, another thing I just want to add, that is good to see that the group is a diverse group. And I'm so proud to see Ms. Johnson on it, because we know that she's came several times to speak at our meetings and is very strong. She's a very good advocate, not just for her child, but for every child in Prince George's County Public Schools.
Next.
Board Member Joshua Thomas.
Thank you. Yeah, I will say I'm just speaking a second time, just out of some concern that there seems to be some pushback on this proposal, which I thought is something that really unanimously we could all get behind. So I know we have not cast a vote just yet, but really these comments are just feeling some concern that there may be folks that are opposed to this. Just to some of the data points that were provided by Mr. Murray, I know that had some pushback. When we're looking at socioeconomic differences, we're seeing that 51% of white students met or exceeded expectations versus 29% of African American, 20% of Hispanic, Latinx, and 22% of free and reduced meal students. And that's from MCAP data from 4th grade. So again, I think really the bottom line for me here is this. I don't want to at all take away from the hard work that's being done from some of our current staff and subject matter experts on this, and don't want to diminish their work and take any credit away from them. But surely we can all agree together that we could do a better job of educating our kids to read. I think we can all probably agree that that is the case, and that by doing so, we will be doing our jobs with fidelity in prior. And surely the same board that just approved what was, I think, a $2 to potentially $3 million performance evaluation tool with very, very little questions and concern, surely that the same board won't feel concern about supporting a work group that is not awarding any contracts tonight, that is not actually making any payments tonight, but has just simply marked aside $100,000 up to for the benefit of our students in their reading. I just want to make sure that I'm putting that out there for the public who are watching, because I feel like this is a no-brainer to support. Again, I know we haven't cast a vote. I just wanted to speak on that just in case there were folks that were hesitant about supporting this. So that's all. I'll leave my comments.
Thank you, Board Member Thomas. Board Member Valentine.
Well, thank you, Board Member Thomas, and thank you for not, assuming anything from what I see as oversight and questions, because as I mentioned earlier, I appreciate my colleague Murray's, profession, his work, as a male educator, I salute him and the work he's done. And I've heard about his work in Washington, D.C. And it's his work in the classroom has never been questioned. I've never said that. I guess, again, my concern is around the fiscal note that, again, seems arbitrary and is not outlined on how it's going to be spent. And so I guess in a constructive way, Board Member Thomas and Board Member Murray, I'm in a position to vote in support of this if you are willing to remove the fiscal note. And as a committee, once you all come together and start meeting, and you all come back and able to sort of outline as a group, the cost and how you like to spend it, that we could reconvene on that issue. And so that's a friendly amendment to support the work group, and its mission, Board Member Thomas, but that we be responsible and transparent to the community about dollar figures, how it's going to be spent, and we come back. That's all. I don't think that would in any way prohibit the group from coming together. I would love to attend when I can to just listen in, because I'm, something of interest to me. But I think just as a way to come together, as you remember, Mr. Board Member Thomas, unanimously, at least my vote will count. And so I just want to be a vote in favor of the mission of this working group, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Board Member Valentine. I was next, and then after me will be Board Member Adam Stafford.
I'm sorry. That was a question to Board Member Murray whether he would accept that friendly amendment. I mean, it's a question whether you accept that friendly amendment.
I'm thinking about it, Mr. Valentine. I'm also thinking about it, and I appreciate those comments and the juxtaposition of what Mr. Thomas said. I mean, it appears that this board comes willing to vote up many a contract, 20 times the amount that I know we're not all very well versed in. Whereas tonight, I'm not asking for anyone to give out any money. We're just allocating a potential future use that the whole board, will all have to vote on in the future. And so I feel a bit of a double standard there. And I also can't think of a better cost of a school system dollar than to support literacy of students who are not reading on grade level. And so that's my hesitation. So I'm still thinking on that, Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Board Member Murray. So I've been on this board for 7 years now. And when we look at the full curriculum of reading and math was our bigger challenge for our community. And we put into action bringing on, I can't remember the exact title, but math partners to help support not only the teachers who were not comfortable with math, but also the ability to help students. And as you know, any plan of action, it takes time in order to implement. And so I just want to put that out there that reading, although there is room for improvement, math was a bigger hindrance for our students. And in some cases, our teachers that teach many topics because of math was not a comfortable topic. And so I think that we have to be mindful of the fact that any change that we decide to do as a result of this focus work group, we need to give it some time in order to see whether or not it is working. So Board Member Valentine really touched on a lot of things, but then also Board Member Murray in one of his comments mentioned that the data was not PGC specific data. And I think before we assign any dollars into a focus work group, I think maybe the first step would be to look at what we're doing in PGCPS for our students and what have we implemented recently and the trends that we're seeing in reading in all grade levels, in particular, those that you're looking to serve, because those students that have been impacted by the change that we've made in the recent past, they're no longer in first, second, and third, they're in fourth, fifth, and sixth. So I think we need to look at this as a cohort. So I think that I too would support this effort if there was not a fiscal note attached to it, but also I could support this effort if the first step was to understand Prince George's County data and the trends that we have been seeing over the last few years before we move forward. If we could just make that sort of a pre-phase to this so that we know not only where we're going, but where we're coming from. And so I think it's always important that when we decide that we're going to make a change, that we have some baseline data to measure our success from. So I too could support this effort for a focus work group if the fiscal note was removed and we take that first step to understand Prince George's County data. Thank you.
I have a question also.
Before you begin, sorry, Dr. Miller, we have Board Member Adam Stafford.
But I was before her when you cut me off.
Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have a hands up. So Board Member Adam Stafford, is it okay if Board Member?
No, let her go. She can go. I can wait.
Was she? Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead. Thank you. So I do believe that my colleague, Board Member Thomas, gave some Prince George's County specific data, specifically around fourth grade reading levels and specifically disaggregated by race. And I want to just make sure that we're being clear about what we're talking about. We're talking about literacy. So as we think about, the need for math support, given the recent shifts to Common Core, more of what we're doing in math classes has to do around reading complex word problems and students being able to explain their answers in writing. What does that boil down to? Literacy. Being able to read those problems, break and decode down what your answer will be and respond in writing. So it's not, reading and it's not like arithmetic as we may have been accustomed to in growing up, but literacy is at the core of every single subject. Gains in literacy for students of color specifically will reduce the amount of students being referred to special education. We know that the more students are referred to special education, the larger the probability is that they'll be entered into the school to prison pipeline. And so that is one of the key indicators as to, that will, determine whether students are not only referred to special education, but suspended or pushed out of their classrooms. And so, while I do understand there may be some just wanting more clarity, what I'm understanding this vote as is that we're authorizing this work group, and then at a later date, once there is more information, we will then vote on how to spend that money. But, if we think about prioritization, I think that we should be prioritizing having focused, dedicated study on this topic. And, it maybe, we can understand if this money is coming from the board office budget or coming from the school system budget, that's something that I have a question about. But I hope that we will, consider that, most teacher preparation programs are not teaching teachers how to teach reading. And I think that is something that I really want to drive home. Teachers, that is not, when we go to school to learn how to become a teacher, you are taught, in most cases, your content area. And so teaching the science of reading is something that's very specific. And we talk about where's the data. This is what we're talking about, is spending an intense time focusing on the data that can propel us forward. So I just hope that that will, help some of my colleagues see the urgency in this, especially because as students return to school, they're going to be suffering from significant learning loss, and being prepared with specific recommendations around literacy and reading will help us to propel our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Adam Stafford. Dr. Miller?
You can go on to the next. Well, I was just going to ask Dr. Golson, would she agree to looking into adopting a phonics-based reading program for pre-K that will possibly eliminate the need for a focus group, because we're talking about 4th and 5th graders. What are we doing with those students at that developmental stage?
What I would recommend is that we do a work session so that we could inform board members about our entire literacy program. Not just at the primary level, because if you fully understood our literacy plan, the supports we provided, the data that we can show around the literacy coaches and the work that they have done, and what the writing component pieces have revealed, then I think that would help to direct the work that we still need to do.
Thank you, Dr. Golson. Next up is Board Member Harris, followed by Board Member Ahmed, and I will follow Board Member Ahmed.
Oh, okay. Thanks for acknowledging me. So I'll make this really quick because Board Member Adam Stafford said it really, really well. I just wanted to comment on how a work group like this and the understanding of literacy for our students is really the foundation of really any subject that they learn. Specifically, I know I jumped in here because we started talking about mathematics, which is something that I'm heavily involved in. And you know that the first step in solving any word problem is to read it. and we know that when you do distance problems, age problems, work problems, percentage problems, it all involves understanding what is being asked before you actually get to the numbers. So I think a work group like this to help understand would help multiple subjects, not just specifically the one. So that's all I had.
Thank you, Board Member Harris. Board Member Ahmed.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Murray, thank you so much for bringing forward this proposal. I think that case has been made that this is something that's needed and necessary. From my understanding of what has been said, it's clear to me that that amount is not going to be an immediate expenditure, that it will be something that will be in the future. And I appreciate that your forthcomingness and that there will likely be a fiscal impact as it relates to this work. As a person that's co-leading one of our only live, fresh, and well and functioning focus work groups, I can attest to the fact that the purpose of work groups is that we're going to bring forward recommendations, policy recommendations, budget recommendations to make sure that we're moving our system forward in those areas of focus. And so just as this body can expect many policy and budget proposals or recommendations through the English Language Learner Work Group, I expect the same will come out of your work group, Mr. Murray. And I appreciate you at the forefront saying that there will be a strong budgetary impact for moving this work forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ahmed. I'd just like to follow up my comment on this. Again, I have to reference the time that I've been on the board and the time that my student was in PGCPS public schools. There was an issue with reading a few years ago, and Prince George's County Public Schools implemented a program where students are required to read and write in every subject: gym, art, music, math. Every subject, the students were required to read and write because of the concern for literacy in Prince George's County Public Schools. Again, I think it's highly important that we understand where we stand today, and I think that this focus work group can provide some baseline information that is clearly about Prince George's County Public Schools and the recent data. Additionally, Board Member Ahmed brought up a very good point about the focus work group. The focus was to come up with actions that would be considered by all of our committees: the OBAFA committee, policy committee, and academics. So that was the process. So to assign a fiscal note to a focus work group, again, was not the intent when we created the focus work group. And if there is a need for it, then I believe the focus work group should come back with information that they can clearly delineate how the money will be spent and how the services will be acquired. And so I highly encourage that. And I too believe that we should always take some time and understand where we are and to improve the system. There's always room for improvement. So I think that Board Member Murray is on the right track for pulling together the focus work group, but I think that it just needs a little bit more thought and a little bit more effort put in evolving this idea into something that board members can unanimously get around and fully understand what to expect once this focus work group is done with its work. Thank you. I see Board Member Rahila Ahmed.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Murray, I'm fully confident in your ability and the ability of the work group members that you've put together to do this work, to provide policy and budget recommendations. I also want to note that, I'm just a little bit frustrated and kind of confused as to why we're discussing this in kind of the way that we are. Because I think that this is something that's very core to us as a board. We didn't have this discussion when we were passing really, really progressive goals for climate action change. We weren't doing that. And so, and that was a very important issue, and we all voted in support of that. And so I hope that we all come together and vote in support of this, because this is just as important, and it's going to mean the world of difference to all of our students. Thank you.
I'd like to just make a comment. I've listened to the discussion, and it appears that the majority of the board members are supportive of this work group. The question keeps coming up about the fiscal note and the fact that Board Member Murray just said he pulled 100,000 out of his head.
I did not say that.
Well, okay. You didn't define how that $100,000 figure came, because I heard that being asked.
Which is why I'm not asking for the board to spend $100,000. It's an amount allotted for future use that the board will then vote on.
Okay, and so you're saying that you want the board to vote to allocate that amount for future use. Am I correct?
Right. That the board will have to come back and give permission to use, yes.
Well, what I keep hearing is that there's no problem with the fact that you would have to come back, but justify what that amount will be used for. Where did that particular figure come from? What was it based on? That's what I keep hearing. I don't hear that. I mean, what I'm hearing is that there's full support for the work group or the focus group. It's just that there's question about where the figure arrived for the use, even though you're not going to use it right away. How did you come up with that?
Would it be amenable to you, Dr. Miller, if we remove the fiscal note and then just add on to it that there will be an RFP drafted and put out on this matter? Would that be amenable to you, Dr. Miller?
That would be amenable to me as well.
Perfect.
Any other comments?
Dr. Miller, I see one hand. I'm sorry, I'm putting it out in the atmosphere. I'm about to say Dr. Valentine. Board Member Valentine, this is your second round.
Yeah, there's a doctor in my house, and she earned that. And I'll just say parenthetically, Prince George's County has the most doctorates of any school system in the DC metro area. Thank you very much, Dr. Golson. I just want to clarify. I know Dr. Ahmed. I'm calling that Dr. Ahmed. Someone mentioned the climate action. Was there a fiscal note on that committee? I mean, I know there's some comparisons made. I just want to make sure people who are watching understand.
Yeah, I can provide a point of clarification. There was no fiscal note, but we did have some very lofty goals of 100% clean source energy by 2030, 100% clean transportation by 2040, 100% zero food waste by 2030, 100%
Understood
by 2040. So no one questioned the dates of those, the goals that were listed there, and those were very lofty and very important goals. That's why we passed this. But I do want to note that the level of scrutiny that is happening right now with Mr. Murray's proposal is not what has happened in previous proposals presented by other board members that could have this level of and degree of action. Sorry, go ahead, Mr.
I apologize. Let me just again reiterate where my area of concern is, and if that climate action came forward to this board with $100,000, a $500,000, $1 million fiscal note, and the person in the chair could not tell me how that money was going to be spent, I would have the similar concerns. I'm not questioning the need for us to come together as a board and address this issue. That is not my concern. Not my concern, but that's not a concern of mine today. It is of the fiscal note. And I know we've talked about other votes we've taken. $100,000 is a lot of money. And there are people who are watching this saying that you can't act like $100,000 is not a lot of money. I don't care if it's $2 billion. If I lost $100,000, if we misplaced $100,000, somebody's going to jail. And so I want to make sure that we every dollar is spent. At the same time, I do appreciate my colleague considering at least my initial question around the fiscal note. Understanding the mission of the group is one that I support wholeheartedly. But again, my concern is with the fiscal note. I'm willing to work very closely with Board Member Murray if he would like in discussing, how that moves forward and to come back to this body in a separate motion after we've gone through some of the steps of rolling it out, understanding the need, and then having Dr. Golson and her staff come in and say, you know what, after further consideration, we realized that at least on these things we thought we were going to put in a scope of work, we don't need to do that anymore. And on this area, this is where we need improvement. I think it just gives clarity to people who are wondering, how are we spending our money in a fiscal crisis? And that's all. I mean, I have no concerns with the need for this working group, but I do have concerns around the fiscal note. And so if that is an agreement that the fiscal note will be removed, you have my vote.
Well, he just stated that we can remove the fiscal vote. Am I correct, Mr. Murray, Board Member Murray?
It was to remove it and to add in that we will draft and put out an RFP.
Okay. Mr. Williams, Board Member Williams.
We have one more speaker.
Well, I'm sorry. Just clarification. When you say RFP for how much and RFP to do what? I mean, I think what I was concerned is, to take a vote on this and then to come back next week and say we put an RFP out because y'all voted on it. I don't want that to be said. I want it to be said, you came back with a consideration for a scope of work, and then we had someone look at it and said, based on what we currently do, which is Dr. Golson's team, and what you're expecting this to do, this is how much it should cost. Before we just go out and say we're going to do a scope of work, and then just lo and behold, someone just comes around and all of a sudden has $100,000 invoice, and I'm like, oh, isn't that convenient? I mean, I think I just like to have this separately, take a separate vote of the fiscal note, and we address this later once the committee is fully, constituted. And so that's my concern. I would not vote to support anything where it's an assumption that an RFP is going to be put out with a dollar figure without a scope of work, because right now it doesn't seem like there is one.
Thank you, Board Member Valentine. I thought we had Board Member Burrows, but I believe he put his hand, no, he's there. Board Member Burrows?
It sounds like what Mr. Murray was just attempting to do was to have a compromise. He heard the concerns that several of you made, and he asked the chair, would it be amenable to you if I did it in the way that he stated? The answer was yes. And so if we're not going to honor that compromise, I think we should take an up or down vote, because we're talking in circles at this point.
I don't think it's not that we're not going to honor it. Board Member Murray indicated that he would go forward without the fiscal note and at a later date present one. So my understanding right now is that with the compromise that Board Member Murray has given in terms of the Science of Reading work group, is that they will continue to work, develop their proposal, and at a later date, come back to the board with a fiscal note. Is that correct, Board Member Murray?
Right. I mean, like a RFP is a request for a proposal, and it's free to put out a request for proposal. So in seeking to define a scope of work, put out an RFP that we can then have proposals that I can then begin to gauge the cost and what are the services out there. So that was an attempt to do that. Yes.
I guess
which I thought me and you agreed on.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. But I mean, RFPs have scope of work. What is the scope of work? That's all my question.
Well, I guess that's what the study group has to come up with, the scope of work. He can't give you the scope of work. I mean, he can't give you, that's what the group is assigned to do. Am I correct? To come up with the scope of work, outline what's going to be needed to implement the proposal. And at that point of time, once you get the scope of work, you can put out an RFP and find out who would be able to implement your plan.
So, Dr.
Yes,
my
you're
point
right,
is,
Dr.
can we see that scope of work before it goes out? That's my point. Right now, I'm in the dark. As a board member, I would be the first time I would see it is when it goes public. My question is, can we see it before it goes public?
I'd be happy to send you absolutely anything before it goes to anyone, Mr. Valentine.
Well,
I think it should come to the whole board.
Yeah,
well, the whole board. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. This is just the is this second reader or first reader?
Yes.
Second reader.
Second reader. So before it goes in on the consent calendar for a vote for it to go out for an RFP, we would need to see the scope of work.
I'll be happy to share that with the whole board before that goes out.
I think it needs to be an action item. For it to be the RFP, we need to make it an action item. It will not be something that is not transparent. So the focus work group, we have to remember the focus work group is the development of an idea that will become an action that the board committees will consider to take and move it forward. And so I'm hearing some things that are in conflict with the intent of the focus work group in policy 8100. So it sounds like to me that Board Member Murray is seeking to create a focus work group to create an RFP to look into that topic of the science of reading. And the intent of the focus work group was to take a topic, to develop it and come up with actions that each of the committee would take under consideration that the school system would make. So I just want to make sure that we're using the correct terms and looking for the correct outcome. So is this a focus work group, or is this something that RFP that Board Member Murray wants to develop over time, and it's not a focus work group?
It's pretty clearly labeled as a focus work group. Not only has it passed first reader, it passed the budget committee, of which you sit on, and
we have
was
to
discussed there.
I'm sorry.
And it hasn't changed.
Well, we have to remember the vote that was taken was to put it in first reader. It wasn't approving it. It was putting it in first reader so we can get to this point that we can have discussion. And so, but we have to remember that the focus work group was always intended that the actions that came out of that focus work group would go into each of the committees before the board took any action. It was to develop or evolve an idea. And so what you see with the ELL and the climate action, it is to develop and evolve an idea into an action that we would take at some point. So it may be mislabeled. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. And that is why we're having this challenge. I think that what you're doing has a great, can make a great impact on the school system. I just want to make sure that we do not put the cart before the horse. And that's why I believe the questions are around just the fiscal note. Board Member Burrows?
Yes, I think Mr. Murray has already addressed the issue of the fiscal note. You all repeatedly asked him to remove it, and he did. Mr. Valentine asked that before any RFP goes out, for that RFP to come to the full board. Mr. Murray said, okay. And so I'm not sure. I've watched Mr. Murray make several concessions in the spirit of unity, giving, overtures. You talk about the spirit or the purpose of a focus work group. I'll remind the board that Ms. Ahmed and I wrote that policy. And so
with my help and Dr. Thornton's, thank you.
You're so welcome. And so what I would tell you that this is clearly a focus work group. It was labeled as a focus work group. That's not in dispute. You asked the fiscal note to be removed. It's removed. You asked for it before any RFP to go out, for it to come to the board. He's agreed to do that. And so I wonder why we're still talking about this.
Well, we can call for the vote, but we just want to be very clear that what we're voting on. And my understanding now is that we're voting on the focus group moving forward with a proposal to be brought back to the board, indicating the scope of work that they will or have already done.
Yes,
That's
I understand it that way as
no
well.
fiscal note. Okay. So with that being said, because we're at 10 o'clock now, I'm going to ask for, we're going to call for the vote for the focus group, and I'll repeat it. And if I'm incorrect or not putting it all in, Mr. Board Member Murray, this is your vote. I mean, your motion for the.
Dr. Miller, we could have Ms. King read the motion.
Please.
Okay, as I understand it, excuse me, this vote is for the approval of the Science of Reading Work Group proposal without a fiscal note attached. And then there's also the understanding that the focus work group would develop an RFP with a scope, would develop a scope of work for the RFP that would come to the board for approval.
With that, may I have a second?
Second.
Are we ready for the vote? Roll call. Well, we can just say all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? It's a unanimous vote. Thank you.
Thank
Now
you,
we
Dr.
can-
Miller.
Now we can move to the school to prison pipeline work group. Do you have a fiscal note? Just joking.
So moved.
Second.
Just a point, I'm sorry, just a point of clarification. This is a recommendation from the committee. So a second's not required. I think we're at the point of discussion.
Is there any discussion about this proposal or this work group? Okay. if there's
Yes,
no-
there is. I'm sorry, I was on mute. I'm sorry. Yes,
Okay.
there are two
Pamela-
hands that are up. Board Member Valentine?
No, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Burrows, board colleague Burrows, for bringing this up. I will just say there are two things. One, I saw you cited the report from Peril to Promise, a report that I had a chance to read, and there's, I have hard copies that I could share with your group. And I don't know whether they're even online. This for those who don't know, this was a task force that was put together in the mid-1980s. Dr. Thornton and others put this together as the county was transitioning from a predominantly white to a predominantly Black county. And a lot of research was done. There was a group brought together, and they met regularly for 3, 4, 5 years and put together these reports that former Chief of Staff Christian Rhodes shared with me. I have them in my possession, and I'm willing to share them with you, Mr. Burrows, and your work group, because I think they are really valuable to kind of look at where we were and where we are. Secondly, I would, I appreciate in your summary if you do have sort of a configuration of the group, so I don't have any questions around that. But I guess my question is similar to the one before around the fiscal note, 50 some odd thousand. That again, where's that going to go? Where that number come from? And if you're amenable to what we agreed on with the previous one, which is you remove that and then you come back once this group has been constituted in order to sort of substantiate that number and the any contract that will be signed, just so that the board and the community can be fully transparent about how money is being spent. So that's my request to you, my volunteering around the reports, but also my question to you about whether you're willing to do the same. So I believe if you do, you would most likely have a similar unanimous vote as our colleague Murray did.
I appreciate your willingness to forward me the reports. I hope I can get them. I will read them in great detail and work to incorporate them. As far as the fiscal note, I would say that I am actually unwilling to move it. Whatever contract that is developed will follow whatever procurement rules and laws and policies of the Board of Education. How did we come up with this number? The Advancement Project is a nationally renowned group that specializes in this work. Initially, the price tag was greater than this, but through the amazing work that we anticipate occurring through the Social Justice Academy, we decided to do the student focus groups through the Social Justice Academy. And that saved us a considerable amount of money. And so we were able to get the cost down to $55,000 and then use the Social Justice Academy students as our student focus group. And so, there were a number of meetings that took place in conjunction with school system leaders. And so I want to thank, Ms. Irvin. I want to thank Dr. Golson. I want to thank, every school system leader who kind of helped with this. I will say why I think this is important. And actually, I want to thank Pamela Boozer-Struthers on this as well. One thing that we all agree on is that we know that the school to prison pipeline does not begin or end with SROs in high schools. We know that we need to examine all of our policies and practices and procedures to go out of our way to ensure that we're doing whatever we need to do to lead in this area. I believe Prince George's County Public Schools can lead the nation in dismantling the school to prison pipeline. And that's why when you look at the work group participants, we have board members, we have the CEO, we have parents, we have students, we have the PGCEA, we have the state's attorney's office, we have the public defender, we have community representatives, because we believe that it's critically important to have buy-in from all of these groups and examine all of these issues together. And you know, it's the saying that I'm just now starting to accept, that if you want to, go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And this is a committee that's designed to go far and go together. And so I hope that answers some of your questions.
And I want one final question. I appreciate the comments. And so again, I'm a little bit surprised, because it seems as if you already have a contractor or a group that's already you sort of earmarked for this money. And so I guess how do we ensure? The first question is, was there someone locally who you considered? And secondly, how did you come up with the selection process for this group? Was it open? Was it like a sole source process for this?
I appreciate your question. Actually, I would say pre-pandemic, maybe a year before the pandemic, Ms. Boozer Struthers attended a seminar at NSBA that was held by the Advancement Project. And when we passed this work group, you know, a while ago, she sent me the PowerPoint of that session. And so in November, myself, members of the administration, actually, I think maybe Ms. Boozer Struthers was a part of one of those meetings. Yeah, she was. And we met with a lot of people, just so you know, but the Advancement Project is a local group. It's a national group, but is run by local Prince Georgians. And so whatever the procurement rules are, whatever they need to be, you know, I'm committed to following 100%. I will reiterate that there was an additional portion of this that was going to cost an additional $75,000 to do a work group with our students. I'm just so happy that the Prince George's County Social Justice Academy students will serve in that capacity, which has saved us a considerable amount of money.
Thank you. Board Member Boozer Strother.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to have an opportunity to say thank you to Mr. Burrows for bringing the work group to this point. And I actually, as you noted, was very impressed with the Advancement Project and of course their endorsement from the National School Boards Association for the work that they do, and brought them forward. And I'm glad to, and at this point, I hadn't considered that work groups might have funded consulting help. And I can see the benefits of that in some of these cases. And I think this is definitely one of those opportunities, for, some of the conversations that we've had already and in the community. And I think this is going to be tremendous help in bridging a gap between, where our school communities, what they're saying about, how, positive feelings about, say, security and SROs, and concerns from the community about that should not be, wanting to remove SROs, that there's been a conversation gap. And I think this is going to be very helpful in closing that gap and create understanding. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Boozer Strother. Board Member Nina Jackson.
Thank you. I won't take up too much of our time, but I just want to echo Board Member Boozer Strother's sentiments. For a lot of different reasons, I wholeheartedly support Board Member Burrows' focus work group. I don't know if he remembers, but one of our first initial introductions prior to my service as a SMOB centered around the school to prison pipeline and student discipline. In fact, with the original School to Prison Pipeline Focus Work Group, I was supposed to be one of the student members that served on the Focus Work Group, and here we are now. With that being said, I also love the integration of the Social Justice Academy. I sung his praises, to all of my peers about his brainchild with the Social Justice Academy. And I just want to thank him publicly for not only the Focus Work Group, but allowing me to work with him as a partner on that project. So thank you, Mr. Burrows, again, for the Focus Work Group and for your work on the School to Prison Pipeline.
Thank you, Board Member Jackson. Board Member Queen, and then I have a statement after Board Member Queen.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice President, Chairwoman. But I just want to kudos everything everybody else said and just remind us as a board that it's our job not only to educate, because now that we're going through this pandemic, we have social, emotional, health, mental well-being that we have to be actually aware about now. But it's also students, and because I always say, and you hear me use that word kids, and I know a lot of people don't like that, you rather hear students or children, but they still kids, they're minors, they need rehabilitation, they don't need school to prison pipeline, they need direction, and it is up to us to direct them at that young age. So I believe this is a good program. I think it will be beneficial as this work group get together and dig a little deep so we can do whatever we need to do to make sure that these kids are rehabilitated and get the services they need, not fall into the school and prison pipeline. So again, I want to thank the whole Focus Work Group that's going to be coming and working ahead of time for the great job that I know you're going to do. And I want to thank you, Mr. Burrows, and thank the board who's about to vote on this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Queen. Thank you, Board Member Burrows, for bringing this to the board. And I love the evolution of this focus work group that was initiated back in 2019. I'm glad to see that the evolution of the idea come to this point where there is a group of individuals that's a part of it. And I believe you have a schedule on yours, because as a part of the focus work group, we need to have a schedule because there are actions that have to occur according to the schedule. I do have a challenge with the fiscal note attached to it and the transparency of how that work was done. This has nothing to do with the subject matter. It's all about the fiscal note. And so I really would like to hear more about how you came to that number and how you chose the group that appears to be a nationally known, well-qualified organization.
And I'll just say, I will reiterate, I'm trying to pull up an email, so bear with me. I believe 2 years ago, Ms. Boozer Struthers attended an NSBA forum on dismantling the school to prison pipeline and what boards of education could do to lead that work. That panel was conducted by the Advancement Project. The Advancement Project is a nationally renowned, qualified group in this space to lead this work. In November, recognizing that we had all of these conversations around SROs, police-free schools, we got together and said we needed a more comprehensive strategy that focused on and looked at things comprehensively. As Ms. Boozer Struthers said, we're operating in silos. And I'm just now realizing how dark my lighting is. Sorry, I want to go turn on light over there. But we've been operating in silos. Either you support police-free schools or you don't support the school to prison pipeline. We've been so segmented. And so we met with several groups hand in hand with the administration, and the Advancement Project came up with a proposal. A part of that proposal was to do what you see here. Another part of it was to charge us additional money to do focus groups with our students. We made very clear that we could use our Social Justice Academy students for that portion of it. And so, you know, I'm not sure what.
So you answered the question, and I wanted to specifically hear that you met with several groups and this was developed. And so I appreciate that. And just to make the public clear on the difference between Mr. Burrell's efforts that he's made at this point to come up with a fiscal note that he can justify, along with the fact that there were other people considered before coming up with the advancement group, that is what I wanted to hear. And so I can support this $55,000 fiscal note to accomplish this because there was clearly something done to determine who could provide the best quality service for a specific amount. Now, this is completely different from Mr. Murray's proposal that he doesn't have that. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate you answering that question. So thank you very much.
And I would just say there's no need to undermine Mr. Murray's proposal. We've done different things and they're not related. And so I appreciate you supporting this one, but we don't need to tear down anyone else's efforts to uplift this one.
No, I'm not tearing down. I was just explaining why I could support yours versus why I could not support the others. And the other one, that is what I was doing. I was not downplaying. I was just showing the difference between the two because I didn't want it to appear as though I'm playing favoritism in any kind of way. So I'm just justifying the decision that I've made to support your fiscal note associated with the focus work group. So that's all I was doing. I wasn't putting his down at all.
Any more discussion?
Madam Chair, I see no more hands up.
All right, can I call for the vote?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Adams Stafford,
Yes.
Mrs. Ahmed,
Yes.
Ms. Boozer Strother,
Yes.
Mr. Burrows,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Montero,
Yes.
Mr. Murray,
Yes.
Mrs. Queen,
Aye.
Mrs. Shepherd,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Valentine,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
and Dr. Miller.
Yes, the vote is unanimous. The motion passes. Thank you for that hearty discussion. Now there's no non-consent agenda. Follow-up items from the previous meetings of the board will be posted upon receipt. At this point in time, I'd like a motion for us to reconvene or move back into executive session.
So move.
Second.
It has been moved in second that we will move back into executive session. I'd like to thank the public for your attendance and participation tonight and look forward to having you join us again on Thursday, March 25th. Good night. Oh, and by the way, board members, Ms. King is.
Yes, I'm sorry, if I could, I think we need a vote on that motion. And I just wanted to let board members know to expect a link in a different link in their email addresses.
Oh, I thought I took a vote. It has been moved in second that we go into executive session. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous vote to go into executive session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, audience.